What's the most absurd thing that happened in an escape room? A kid I knew from school, his family owns an escape room business. The ongoing issues is just people trying to take things when they're clearly nailed down or nailed to the wall. He did mention, though, that a little kid peed in one of the prop bottles. I attended a Saw series-themed escape room with my significant other and some randos, since the room required 4 to 6 people. We got locked in to start, chained to fixtures like the darkroom scene from the movie. The lights are off. As soon as the thing starts up, one of the randos says, "I have a piece in case we need to shoot someone." I thought he was joking. We all did. Eventually, the lights turn on and he pulls out a real gat and sits it in the sink and says, "I'm leaving this in the sink in case something happens to me. This is for everyone." I did an escape room with a group of friends. At the end, you found a flash drive which was supposed to be plugged into a computer. We opened the document and there was instructions to print out. We started to print and then the printer gave us an out of ink error. We assumed this was part of the game and started looking for a magenta cartridge. Then an employee slipped into the room, replaced the cartridge, and told us to hit print again. Apparently it wasn't part of the game, they just ran out of ink. One time our players were doing the bank heist theme, done in the dark and you have headlamps, and about 4 puzzles in, one of my employees realized that they'd had an item in their pockets still. So, we brain blasted for a couple of minutes and decided the best course of action was to pretend the employee was a security guard and walk around the bank. So, we went over the room intercom and warned them to hide because it looked like a security guard was coming into them. Seeing all of the players hide in complete fear was priceless. One guy wasn't even hiding, he was just sprawled up against the wall. Our, quote, security guard walked around, said, everything seems good, and placed the item down on the desk. It was legendary that they didn't suspect anything. I had a group of drunk guys go in and they ran through their allotted hints pretty quickly. They asked for another hint and we said over the speakers that they were out of hints. One of the guys started threatening to take his clothes off until we gave him another hint. We didn't even have to give him the extra hint though. His friends chilled him out and ended up finding the next clue pretty shortly after that. I did an escape room with my family and now the workers are obliged to tell you not to lick the light bulb. This is because some guy thought if he licked the light bulb, the answer would be revealed on it. The only answer he found was that light bulbs are hot and can burn your tongue. It's always funny to think that every completely unnecessary rule had an absolute moron who's the reason it was put in place. The same is true with HR policies. Don't be the reason HR is a policy on anything, folks, unless you want everyone in the office to remember you for the rest of time. I went to one where there were 3 identical rooms where teams competed at the same time. If you finished, then you got to watch and listen to the other teams. Our team did pretty well and we got to watch the other 2 teams try to complete it. Anyway, there was this one lock which is a number combination and you solve it by finding some sheet music in a book with 5 notes on it, which corresponded to numbers. The piece was entitled The Key or something similar, so you knew you needed it for a something. Anyway, this other team, instead of converting to numbers and putting in the combination, chanted this 5-note tune at the lock. When it didn't work, they tried it again, and then someone else tried. This went on for 10 minutes and got louder and louder. Eventually, the game master stepped in and told them it was not going to work. Apparently, they were the only team ever to do that. My buddy guessed a locks combo, which gave us the final clue, but we hadn't found the other ones. We ended up solving the room backwards. When the room administrator came in, she had nothing else to say but, "What the frick did you guys do?" The first thing I had to learn working at an escape room was that everything, yes everything in the room was going to be dismantled, pulled on, or messed with in some way. You've got a screwdriver in the room? Maybe there's a clue in the light switch cover. Black light? Must have to take it completely apart. TV for clues? Must have to unplug and change the inputs. And anything not nailed down is bound to be broken. My friend worked in an escape room and he told me that some guys tried to smash a hole in the wall to get out because it was an Alcatraz-themed room. Me and my husband love escape rooms and wanted to share our love of them with our family. When we got out of the escape room, the super amazing nuclear explosion room in Chattanooga, Tennessee, the room operator was cracking up laughing. I guess at one point, in order to get the keys or clues, my over-enthusiastic husband had picked up my 8-year-old nephew by the ankles upside down and was shoving him in barrels. I had no idea he was doing this, but the operator was dying. My husband's family isn't much better. We did an underwater submarine one where you have to escape before you drown in Atlanta. My mother-in-law was hyperventilating in the fake escape room pod with her seatbelt on. As players, we walked into the pirate-themed escape room and there was treasure on the floor, a cannon, a parrot, scattered maps, and a piano. My friend was like, "Oh cool, I can play some backing music." Proceeds to play Pirates of the Caribbean theme, and clunk. The door unlocks and the game is over. The whole point was to solve puzzles to collect pieces to the music sheet of the theme. Best 30 seconds and €20 ever spent. Oh god, my time has come. People do dumb stuff in escape rooms constantly, but that's the whole point and it's usually in good fun. The best part of my old escape room job was that it was literally right next door to a brothel. People would frequently come to our door not realizing that they were one door over from where they wanted to be, and they'd ask, "Hey, how much?" I said in my customer service voice, "Well, it depends how many people you bring. It's $40 each if you're a group of 2, then it goes down to $32 each if you're a group of 8. Usually we recommend groups of 4 to 6 people. That seems to be the sweet spot. Their looks of horror will make me laugh forever." I work at an escape room and too many customers come into play and put the torches in their mouth. Disgusting. We had a couple get in the room and start to get frisky instead of playing the game. Had one who was super drunk and just started to pee in the corner of the room. Another lady who had been drinking decided to stay in the room and throw up everywhere, and then put props to cover up the mess instead of leaving the room to go to the toilet, and many others. One time, a group was trying to figure out the code to a locked compartment. So this huge guy in the group decided this was a waste of time and tried to rip off the component door with his bare hands. He was almost successful, but we stopped him before he could do further damage to the door. He didn't understand what he'd done wrong. Another one happened where a group were handcuffed and they couldn't find the key. The game master was trying to give them clues to find the key, but they still couldn't find it. So, one group member thought it would be the best to use his leg. There was a table in the room with some items on it. He proceeded to knock over all the items with the one kick. That group didn't win. In the Netherlands, there's a prison escape room where everyone is a prisoner and you have to escape prison. It's done in an actual ancient prison. There were about 300 participants and 85 actors, mostly prison guards and some prisoners. They have over 15 storylines which you can follow, and there are other inmates, actors, who'll lead these storylines and send you on quests. Coming back to the question though, at the beginning they warned everyone that no physical contact was allowed because during the first time, people would actually threaten each other to get money and guards had been attacked. Also, they had to warn people that you weren't supposed to try climbing the 50-foot-high prison wall. I had a group come in. I noticed they'd been drinking a little but seemed mostly fine, so I let them into the room and started the clock. They were just wandering around. At the half-an-hour mark, they were laying on the floor and rolling around. They didn't do any harm to the room. I don't remember if they even solved one puzzle. When I let them out after an hour, they claimed they'd had fun, but they didn't really do anything. And did they remember it the next day? I don't know. Something tells the narrator that there was more than just alcohol going on here. Seems kind of risky to do anything harder than booze or more illegal in an escape room, but hey, if that's what floats your boat and you don't seem to actually be annoying the attendants, by all means, trip away. You're probably better than those other people who just trash the rooms. I don't work at one, but my co-worker went to one last year, and his story was hilarious. He's a really serious guy from Boston. He got talked into going to one with his wife and a few old friends that had come down for a vacation. He said as soon as they walked in, he saw a broom that looked completely out of place, so he grabbed it. He thought they'd need it at some point. They made it out of the first room. They got to the second room, and he still got the broom. He swears it was just too out of place to not be a part of the puzzle at some point, and they make it through the second room. The third room, they get stuck. They're reading clues over and over, and he gets fixated on the broom while everyone else is searching the room. He was looking it over, up and down, checking the handle for markings. Mind you, he has terrible nearsighted vision, and checking the bristles. Time was running out, and he was arguing with his wife at this point that the broom was the final clue. Time runs up, they walk out, and the crew is just dying laughing. Someone left the broom by mistake. Nothing more, nothing less. He carried the damn broom through 3 rooms. He got a good laugh about it later, but he was embarrassed at the time. It was a great story he told the next morning at work. Oh god, so many stories. I worked for various escape rooms for a few years. You'd be amazed at the amount of players who want to bring their own tools into the game. Screwdrivers, lockpicks, stuff like that. You have to nail down everything too, or players will absolutely destroy it. The drunker they are when they start, the worse the damage is. We once had a player literally try to tear off the drywall because they thought there had to be something behind it. In one of our rooms, we had this big heavy-duty picture frame screwed into a wall with 4-inch nails, and they still managed to pry it off. We've had doors taken off hinges, kids trying to crawl inside the vents, the list goes on. I don't know if it counts as absurd, but one of the most unique experiences I've had, there was a wedding proposal. The guy worked it out with us ahead of time. We put the ring and a note he wrote professing his love behind some bars in the last puzzle you unlock before getting out of the room. His girlfriend actually ended up fitting her hands between the bars and got the note way early, but the guy was still running around trying to solve stuff because he didn't notice she had it, and she was sitting there reading it, starting to bawl. She said yes, by the way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. At an escape room near me, they had a group of lads on a stag do. These guys got very drunk, and during the escape room they thought they could escape via the sewers. They managed to rip out the manhole cover, which was bolted down into the concrete. This cover is now permanently broken as it's too expensive to fix, they said, advised us not to escape via the sewers. I interviewed for a job at an escape room. They told me that one of their standard instructions you must tell every group is to not stick things in electrical outlets because too many people did it. What's messed up is that I went to an escape room in LA where one of the puzzles was to literally stick a fork in a socket. Everyone told me I was insane when I suggested it, but 2 of the prongs were folded back and there was fake soot around the fake outlet. I did it and the boom gave us the next clue. I thought it was super stupid though. Why risk people learning that behavior and trying it elsewhere? I've heard of multiple escape rooms where one of the solutions is to do something like this that would be really dangerous under normal conditions. I can't even begin to fathom the stupidity involved in teaching your customers to potentially unalive themselves in order to win the game. One guy peed on the wall thinking that the plaster was snow. A group came in that disassembled some of the furniture, a bed and a desk, then ripped some wallpaper off the walls and pulled the heads off some of the stuffed animals. We had a room called the Prison Break. The players were starting in a cell, and to make it realistic, there was a toilet in there. Gladly, people didn't try to take a whiz or number 2 in it, but they also refused to touch it, although we were given a hint that there was a hidden key by the toilet. Later in the game, they had to search for a specific case file for a murderer, but they just searched for their own file as if we'd put a file for every new player in there. A lot of people lost their game on that spot, as it was the last quest to do. I've done a lot of escape rooms and chatted with all the staff. These are the dumbest people I've been told about. The first is one of the rooms that's based on Jumanji and has a waterfall with real water in it. Enough people have tried to drink the water that they had to tell people not to in their opening spiel. Another one has a bunch of museum-style display cases with glass covering the top with different puzzles inside. One of them has sand in it and small holes in the top. Someone tried to tip the display case over and get the sand out so they could read the hidden message. When the game master told them to stop doing that, she stopped momentarily and then tried again 2 minutes later. The game master told her if she did it again, she'd be kicked out, and the woman said, "Just making sure you're paying attention." And people constantly try to pull up floorboards or tear down wallpaper in the horror-themed rooms, even after they've been told there's nothing hidden there and warned not to do it or they'll get charged for the damage. I feel kinda bad about the time our group unscrewed half the pictures on the wall using a paperclip, since none of us had the sense to think that maybe the pictures being screwed down was a sign we weren't supposed to look behind them. To elaborate, we managed to crack the combination lock to a drawer which had a jar of paperclips in it, to which our reaction was, "Do we have to pick a lock?" And then later thinking, "Hey, I think these fit perfectly into the screws on the walls." Turns out the actual purpose of the paperclips was to make a chain to dangle into a tube to pick up a key. I can't remember if we had a magnet or hook to help with that. We found the tube with the key in it behind one of the pictures in the room that wasn't screwed down, and found the code to the combination lock on the drawer below the first one. Whoops! Escape room enthusiast here. We spent far more time than I care to admit trying to figure out what the heck the numbers written in Sharpie on the underside of a rug in the middle of the room meant. Turns out they were an inventory number from the thrift store the designer brought the thing from, and nobody else had ever noticed them before. We still won, but wasted a lot of our time. The second time I went to one, the owner told me that once a group decided to smash all the locks because they found a hammer on which a clue was written. They had to replace all the locks and it's now a toy hammer. I'd like to say those people were morons, but when we found it, the same idea was discussed in our group. Yeah, I mean honestly, as much as some of the people in these other stories seem very dumb indeed now, even a smart group might think that they're overthinking things when the intended solution is actually something as simple as break locks with smashy thing. It's a shame that they had to tone down the authenticity by replacing a real hammer with a plastic fantastic, though. Not absurd, but funny. I was at a heist-themed escape room over Christmas, which featured a bit where you have to maneuver past lasers and get a diamond. If you tripped the laser, the display case would close and you needed to go back to the start of the room to reset everything. After we finished the room, we were told about a group of 4 elderly women who just walked through the lasers and had one of the group stay at the beginning, resetting the trip. Absolute geniuses. I can just imagine it, the cackling as they broke the system. So I'm usually not cruel with my escapees. If I see them looking at the serial number for a prop, I usually send them a message saying they have a good eye, but it won't be relevant to the room. The biggest thing that happens is couples doing the room and fracturing under the slightest bit of pressure. I've legit had people break up in the room because they couldn't handle working through stress together. One time a couple said they were done and kept doing the room, which was extremely awkward for me, who was the poor sap who had to watch them for an hour. Most of the time, people are just plain stupid, which can be fun and frustrating depending on how people react to realizing it. It's very annoying when the people are cocky beforehand and then don't manage anything without a hint and somehow blame us for messing up. There have also been instances of people throwing up or trying to use the prop toilet inside one of the prison cells, but I think my favorite absurd thing was the one proposal I had while working at an escape room. You might think, well, isn't that romantic? And I thought so too, until I found out the escape rooms aren't just something that they both love, which made the proposal unique. It was their first room ever. They'd never played an escape game before in their lives. Weird choice of scenery to propose. Even weirder when you consider that they took 2 friends with them. But it doesn't end there. They barely managed to get out, and the ring was hidden in the very last queue, so if they hadn't managed, stuff would have become very awkward. It became that anyway because when he proposed, neither of their friends really reacted to it. They just stood there blankly, which was made even worse by the fact that the guy was supposed to film the whole thing, which he didn't. And the other girl didn't even know he was proposing, so the surprise at least should have coerced a smile out of her. Nothing. The proposal speech was also delivered with as much passion as a paper bag, and as it turned out, the guy just told everyone at the reception that he didn't really want to marry her. At least not for the time being, but she had got pregnant, so now he was kind of pushed into it. She said yes, but holy crap, all of us watching were hoping she wouldn't. Now, imagine proposing, or even worse, being proposed to in an escape room, knowing you're being watched and listened to through cameras. What an absurd choice to make. I was a player, and I was in a large cage. Through the bars, I had to open a heavy lock. The cage was dimly lit with LED bars on the floor. I got the lock open, but due to it being heavy and me having to handle it through the bars, I dropped it on the LED bar. At first, I thought the light turning off was part of the room. Turns out I broke the LED bar. One of them believed the clue was inside them, and not in the whole Disney kind of "it was inside you all along" way. They thought there was a physical clue stashed inside their person somehow. My dad owns an escape room in a small town in Norway, and the weirdest thing someone has done is probably trying to punch the camera. The guy was like 150 centimeters tall and couldn't reach it. After trying 3 times to punch it, he gave up. Not a worker, but I was with a group of people and one of them became so overwhelmed that almost immediately after walking in, they spun around and walked right back out again. I was the player in this story. There was a horror-themed escape house with people in costumes screaming at you from time to time with chainsaws and stuff. We were in a room with an open jail cage and we knew the next clue was in that cage. But it's pretty obvious that cage was designed to scare the crap out of whoever was inside. I waltzed in, the cage door slammed shut behind me. I took the note and slipped myself out between the bars. We waited for several minutes until I slipped back into the cage so the game could progress. Later on, the workers told us they were really surprised when I'd slipped out of their trap and were trying to figure out what to do next.
There's been a few. The idiots initially tried cutting through their chains. They finally worked it out, and one of them sawed through their leg and shot the other one with a revolver we'd left in there.
Damn, that's wild. They should make a movie about that. It was my first 10-year-old brother's birthday party, and children are dumb as frick. It was themed around a nuclear power station that was going to blow up the town, and essentially what happened was we had an hour to complete 3 rooms. We took 45 minutes to get through the first because kids kept throwing stuff around. One guy got freaked out thinking it was real and pressed the button to end the room. Thankfully it didn't work or something and my dad shouted at him, so he threw a tantrum and literally locked himself inside a chest of drawers. Then, because kids can't organize crap, we had a hunt for the 3 most stressful minutes of my life for the key. Then we got through and it was sort of okay from there because a lot of the kids just gave up and left the room. Never again. Never, ever again.
What stories do you rarely tell because nobody will believe you? I'm a living witness to something known as the McMasterville explosion. CIL, the paint company, made explosives. Their explosives factory, which was a giant factory on the same grounds as the paint-making factory. One night, the whole thing blew up. I was looking right at it when it went. Not just the explosives, but thousands of gallons of flammable liquids from other parts of the factory all went up at once. It was estimated to have the power of a 1 kiloton explosion. I lived on the side of a mountain called Mount St. Hilaire, a little over a mile away looking down at the factory site. When you see an explosion like that from a distance, the land ripples like water, like when you drop a stone in water. I was riding a bike. The ground shook me first, then the air blast knocked me on my butt. The factory was deliberately sunk into the ground and surrounded by a high trench wall in case it ever blew up so the nearby town of Beloil wouldn't get leveled. So the explosive force got punched into the ground and the factory was blown straight up into the air. Tons of wreckage rained down for miles. No one I know of was hit by anything, but many small fires were started all over the place. My next-door neighbor found a train wheel in his backyard, and it was red hot when he found it. Apparently, this occurred in 1972, and at least 6 people died.
That my father was arrested for stealing $100,000 worth of Hershey's Kisses, and during his time in jail I found out that he was not my biological father. My biological father owned a chain of restaurants that I frequented as a kid and teenager. I found all this out a few weeks after my 18th birthday.
What would you even want with $100,000 worth of Hershey's Kisses?
I was 6 years old and my parents took my family down to Disney World. Yay! On the flight down, the pilot made an announcement that if you looked out the window, you could see the space shuttle launching. It was kind of far away, but I could definitely see it in a plume of smoke. Very cool. We land in Orlando, and everyone is dead silent, glued to the TVs. It was the Challenger, and it exploded on launch. I saw the Challenger explode.
The 28th of January, 1986. I faked playing a xylophone for 2 years so I could go to China once. I played trombone for 8 years through middle and high school, and I knew a few people at my college before I went there. They convinced me to join marching band, but were always complaining that the band director wrote impossible drills, 10 counts to move, 30 yards in some instances, run through the bass drums, that sort of crap. I, being the genius that I was, figured, well, I played keyboard in a ska band for a couple years. How hard could xylophone be? Xylophones don't march after all. Answer: xylophone is pretty goddamn hard, and I'd never played one in my life before the first day of band camp, which is when the auditions were. The guy doing the auditions was the percussion instructor for the College of Music, and after my audition, he told me to put the mallets down, step back, and never play xylophone again, which, to be fair, I did butcher the crap out of hot cross buns due to some sort of administrative mess-up. They never got around to actually kicking me out that year, and I hung around and pretended to play the xylophone. Now, every 2 years, my college's marching band takes a big trip somewhere overseas to perform and yada yada yada, and I had entered on an off year. The second year, I show up and do the same thing, except the percussion instructor has been fired. I never really dealt with him beyond defending him with my ability to butcher xylophone music, but to my understanding, he was a general butthole and the music department had been wanting to chuck him out for some time, so they made a big stink about him doing some paperwork incorrectly or something. So it was left to our section leaders to audition the section, and being good friends with the section leader, he just said, "Jenkins, hit something every now and again, but not very hard and make it look like you're playing," so that's what I did. I found the softest mallet in the place, barely tapped the keys, wham, bam, going to China. Everything would have worked out peachy. Except our band director also didn't pay any attention to the orchestra pit. So when he was doling out parts for the music we were going to play in China, he assigned me to concert bells. Like that tiny little 50-pound xylophone that has a sound that would cut through an aerial bombardment. Not only that, I had a solo at the beginning of The Moon Represents My Heart, which, as it was explained to me, is basically Somewhere Over the Rainbow for Chinese people. Everybody knows the song. It's a cultural treasure and not something you want to mess up at a national landmark, because folks will notice. So I busted my butt actually learning how to play that bit over the span of a couple months and managed to avoid offending the people of Shanghai and Beijing. Not all the people, though. A group of Chinese youths caught me urinating into a bush in Shanghai's club district, and I had to duck into a place called Highway 3 with my dinger still hanging out to get away from them. Got to play a set of concert bells on the Great Wall and see a whole bunch of stuff in China, though. It's ridiculous to me that seemingly no one one who was ever in charge of this marching band really had any clue what the hell they were doing, or what was going on really with this band. When I was 19, some friends and I were visiting New York City. After picking them up from the airport, we decided it would be fun to drive down Broadway at night and see it all lit up. It was fun. We got some good pictures from the car, and around 8:30 we decided to drive home. Going northbound on the West Henry Hudson, we were talking and listening to some Journey when someone hopped the highway divider and ran out in front of my car, stopped, and looked right at us. There was no time to stop, no time to swerve, and at 50 miles per hour, he came crashing straight through the front windshield, hitting my best friend directly in the face. Immediately, I pulled over and called the police, then went to look to see if there were any slim chances the man might still be alive. I saw his legs swerved roughly 4 to 6 inches above the knee and on the road near where my car had stopped. My friend in the back seat was crying her eyes out, and my buddy was amped up on adrenaline and shock in the front seat waiting for the police to arrive and remove him from the car. Walking further back, I saw a bunch of people who had stopped to help crowded around the man. I saw his head caved in and a dark pool underneath him, before a kind old gentleman turned me away, saying, "You don't need to see this." In almost no time at all, the fire department was there helping my friend who had a broken nose and shards of glass embedded in his eye and face out of the car. When the ambulance arrived, they tried to pull him in with the man I had hit, which made him freak out and refuse and wait for another ambulance. The cops on the scene took down my story and ran a breathalyzer on me, but I hadn't been drinking. At this time in my life, I didn't drink. Then put my friend from the back seat and I in the back of a car to try and calm us down while they waited for the investigators to arrive. I had called my mom, who lived outside the city, to tell her I had been in an accident and that she should come for support. After about an hour, the investigators arrived, took time marking off the scene, and interviewed us again about what had happened. The police were very nice and all of us were in shock. After interviewing me, I asked the investigator where I could go to the bathroom. He nodded to the trees on the side of the highway and said to have at it. So I stood on the dimly lit bloody highway near the trees and under the watchful eye of the 50-block traffic jam I had created, and let forth a stream I had been holding for hours. Afterwards, they took us back to the local precinct to finish paperwork and meet up with my mom and sister who were waiting there, after having left my stepbrother with my friend who had been taken to the hospital. They had gotten lost and caught in the same traffic I caused, which is why they didn't meet us at the scene. With the paperwork done, my mom asked what had happened to the man. The officer looked at my little sisters and then asked my mom and I to step outside. It was DOA. He had been released from prison that morning. I was shocked when he extended his hand to me and thanked me for helping to clean up the city. After going to the hospital to get my friend and stepbrother, we went home for the evening. The next day, when we picked up my car from the auto shop, I saw the meager sunlight, the after image of what had transpired, blood and brain matter all over the front of my car, an imploded front windshield, and entering the car to take it to a place to get the glass repaired, a large chunk of bloody skull in the passenger seat next to me, hidden under some napkins. My friend who had been in the passenger seat wandered over and I told him not to look inside, but he wouldn't listen and did anyway. I think that is when the reality of what happened sunk in for him, because his eye grew large and he turned around silently to go sit in my mom's car. The entire experience was completely surreal, especially during the drive to get the windshield repaired when alone I drove the car to the shop, the wind whistling through the broken glass. I want to believe that when the cops said, "Thanks for cleaning up the city," the guy who died was maybe just a real piece of work and did some awful stuff, but maybe this dude is just completely indifferent about this stuff, which is pretty horrible. My other thought is that this individual also enjoys creative writing. TLDR, almost had a knife to my brain because of some crazy quack doctor leaping to very rash conclusions. Don't you hate it when doctors jump to conclusions? I know I've posted this somewhere before, but anyway. I was 10, lived out in rural America where my closest neighbor was a football field's length away. Between us was an overgrown field that backed up to my neighbor's horse pasture. I used to run through the fields full blast with weeds and grass stalks and wildflowers that were taller than me. I didn't give a crap. So one morning I wake up and something isn't right. I have this horrible pain in my neck. My neck! Oh God, what happened to my neck? My neck was swollen to the point of it jutting past my chin. It was like a 350-pound person's neck on a little 90-pound girl. I screamed. Mom screamed when she saw it. We took off for the pediatrician right away. Of course, as fate would have it, my usual pediatrician wasn't in that day, so a stand-in was there. I remember very mild tests going on, nothing too crazy, before the doctor explains to my mother that it's a brain tumor and I'll have to have brain surgery right away. I am freaking out. And my mom isn't too calm either. She, however, rationalizes, and before she makes her plans to have them cut into my skull, takes me to her own doctor for a second opinion. The RN at that office peers at me for a minute, performs a few other mild tests, and then goes, aha, and lifts up my ponytail. She points at this small bump on the back of my neck and proudly exclaims, spider bite. 2 days rest and some penicillin and I was 100% again. That was a pretty crazy conclusion to come to after it's like, well, when did the lump show up? Just this day. Then again, what kind of crazy spider bite was it? Around the age of 12, I was diagnosed with severe OCD. I struggled with it so much that I had psychiatrists say they could do no more for me. A therapist that made house calls, and I've even participated in studies, evaluated on the other side of a one-way mirror kind of stuff. Perhaps in desperation, my parents eventually sent me to a psychiatric hospital halfway across the country which specialized in the treatment of OCD. I was there for 3 months until my insurance ran out. Now I'm 22 years old and I've overcome it so much that nobody besides family even realizes anything is/was ever wrong with me. With all these people running around saying I'm so OCD, I eat my M&Ms one color at a time, and them not knowing me back then, I don't even bother divulging a part of my life they would be unable to comprehend the severity of. You know, I totally get that. As someone with ADHD who used to get support of it when I was a kid, and I used to see these people and they'd say to me things like, so, is your ADHD better now? Is it gone yet? And I go, well, I don't think it works like that. I absolutely hated those meetings, but my point is those issues, mental disorders, learning difficulties never really go away. You simply learn to adjust your life around it and behave accordingly in certain situations, and people often don't talk about that much. I'm late to the thread, so this will probably get buried, but hey, I feel like telling the story. It's a bit spooky. Hopefully someone will find it a good read. My mom and I moved into a completely normal/average house when I was about 15. Everything was fine. We loved it. One day I was home sick from school and I was messing around on the computer when I heard our garage door open. I freaked out and went down the hall to get my mobile phone and saw the hallway door that connects to the garage opening. I panicked and yelled, "Get out!" and 2 young boys slammed the door and ran off. I started crying and called my mom. I don't know why I didn't call the police first, who told me to go next door to my neighbors and she was going to come home from work. When she got home, she was speaking to my neighbor for a bit. She, the neighbor, ended up telling us that she thought it was probably the young boy that lived in the house before us. Apparently, he sometimes goes around to everyone's houses and breaks in and eats their food and watches TV and stuff. And for whatever reason, they were all okay with that. Apparently, he came from some sort of broken home and they all felt sorry for him, so they didn't call the police. Mom and I were completely unsettled by that and put new locks on all the doors that week. We didn't care if the other neighbors were okay with that. We weren't. A few months pass and nothing ever happens again. We figure he knows we're not cool with his weirdness and doesn't try to break in again. A week or so later, I'm in bed asleep and I wake up in the middle of night for no reason at all. I'm not hot or cold. I don't need to pee. I didn't have a nightmare. I just woke up. I had this incredibly uneasy and weird feeling wash over me. I felt like something or someone was watching me and I got completely freaked out. I went into my mom's room and slept in her bed that night. It kept happening a few nights and I thought I was just having nightmares or was getting scared of the dark for some reason. I ended up sleeping in my mom's bed for about a week because I got so legit scared of the dark now. I finally worked up the courage to sleep in my own bed one night, but I could barely sleep. I felt totally uneasy, nervous, scared. I got to sleep for a bit, but then I woke up again. I looked outside my window and I could swear I saw a face/figure of someone standing there. Obviously, I noped the hell out and ran back to my mom. One of the nights I was back in her bed. We were all asleep and feeling fine when I woke up to my dog on the end of the bed growling. Now, our dog is an old golden retriever and has never growled or barked at anything. She is a huge wuss and completely placid. She has no problem with strangers, even if someone knocks on the door and comes in. She couldn't care less. So I wake up all dazed, confused, and half asleep. I hear the dog growling and I'm asking her, what's wrong? I look up from the bed and I'm not lying to you, there is a man standing in the doorway with a knife. I screamed like a banshee and the dog started barking at this point. Mom woke up and saw the man too. He went running down the hallway and out the back door. I'm crying my eyes out. The dog is barking her face off and Mom is frantically trying to call the police. An hour later, they finally get here and of course, the dude is gone. Morning comes and we go outside to see that the back gate has had its lock cut with bolt cutters and the door leading into the house had been smashed in. The cops come in and dust for prints and leave crap everywhere, but at the end of the day, they can't and don't do anything. We moved out that same day and went to live with my grandmother and grandfather until we found a new house. Pretty much no one in the family believed us or thought we were just making it up for attention. My family are buttholes. A few weeks later, we get a call from the police and they managed to match the prints to some teenager who just got arrested for breaking into another house. It's the same guy that was breaking into all the houses in the neighborhood and used to live in the house we were in. So Mom's talking to the cops and some of the neighbors when suddenly someone tells us completely casually, "Oh yeah, that's the Millet kid." Wait, did they just say Millet? Yeah, pretty much any Australian will know this last name. Ivan Millet, the serial killer. His nephew was breaking into people's homes and our home while we were sleeping with a knife, and people were okay with that. So anyway, we move into a new house and forget all about it. Until a year ago, Millet's nephew gets 43 years jail sentence. He and his friend murdered another teenager in the same goddamn place his uncle dumped all those bodies. WTF. So, the guy that broke into our house watched me while I was asleep and stood in our bedroom doorway with a knife while we were sleeping, actually murdered another teenager a few years later. Mom and I nearly fell over when we heard about it. No one really believes us, which really annoys me, but it really happened. Sometimes when I think back on what could have happened if I slept in my own bed that night, or if the dog didn't bark, or if we were never woken up, it really freaks me out. It's also left me with a huge fear of the dark. I get really uneasy if I have to go outside at night by myself or if I wake up in the middle of the night. Well, goddamn, I'm English and even I know who Ivan Millet is. But that is a legitimately terrifying story. I went to college at Belmont University in Nashville from 1999 until 2002. While I was there, I worked for record labels, as did a lot of friends who were all in the music business program. Well, one buddy worked for a label called Red Hill Records as an intern/gopher/indentured servant. So on occasion, we could go to events and meet industry people and artists, as this was a small label. They had an artist that we became friends with named Katie Hudson, who was a singer-songwriter at about 17 years old. We hung out all the time since we were just 18 ourselves and had nothing to do but study and bum around coffee shops. As our friendship developed, my roommate developed a huge crush on her. She never seemed to reciprocate the feeling, so I asked her what was wrong with him. You know, trying to be a good friend. And she revealed that she liked me instead of him. So, since I wanted to be a good friend, I had to turn her down because of his feelings for her. That girl went on to be Katy Perry. I kid you not. I suppose that's pretty impressive. I'm not really a Katy Perry person, but good for this guy. And while I'm not going to read them, some of the follow-up comments are pretty cringe. My friend's father owned a Mercedes CLS when I was a senior in high school. One day when his father is gone, we take it out. We have some ganja in both of our grinders in the cup holders, which was freaking stupid. We always put that stuff in the trunk. As we approach a downsloped hill near our school in the most cliche manner possible, he decides he wants to show me how fast his dad's car can go. The road was narrow and the slope was pretty steep downwards, but went right back up after it reached the bottom. He books it, and by the time we reach the bottom of the hill, we're probably going 90 miles per hour. Right at the bottom, we pass a cop, like frickin' fly right by him. He turns his lights on and tries to turn around, but one or two cars gets between us and him. The road was so narrow that he had to do like a 3-point turn to get all the way around. We start to frickin' panic. I have no idea what came over me at this point. Only about 3 seconds after we see the cop, but seeing that it took him so long to turn around made me look at my friend and say, "Keep going." We go to the top of the hill, still going fast AF, take a right, go about 100 yards and take a left into a neighborhood. We go down a random driveway in a cul-de-sac park and turn the car off. We chuck all of the ganja materials out of the car and slump down in our chairs, peeking back. We see the cop go around the cul-de-sac and leave the neighborhood. I swear to God, it was like the goddamn Italian Job. Never been so scared in my life. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. My mom thought Paul McCartney kidnapped me. My mom was walking with me on the beach in the Hamptons when I was an infant. McCartney came up to my mom and asked if he could hold me. My mom was in desperate need of the bathroom and didn't want to go inside with me, so she asked if McCartney wouldn't mind watching me for a few minutes. Apparently, I started sobbing, so he paced up and down the beach and my mom couldn't find me when she came out of the bathroom. She called my dad and they spent 2 hours looking for me before they found McCartney sitting on a bench chair with me in his arms. I don't care if the baby's crying. You stand exactly where I left you with my baby. If someone trusts trust you with there, baby. You don't move an inch. This may get buried and not be as interesting as some of the others, but I have one that nobody ever believes. When I was in 4th grade, I was completely obsessed with Chuck Berry. I mean, religiously obsessed. I still am to a certain extent, but that was back in the day when I was first discovering rock and roll. Well, as fortune would have it, Chuck Berry came to my city to perform at the local venue. He must have been in his 70s at this point. I was beyond excited, so of course, my mother, being the caring and loving parent that she is, bought tickets and we went. The whole entire show, I was in the very front, and then I had an idea. I didn't know if it could possibly work or not, but there was a pause, and I went for it. While Chuck was tuning his guitar, I started yelling, "Mr. Berry, Mr. Berry!" To my absolute bewilderment, he leaned in from the stage and with a huge grin on his face asked me, "What's up, little buddy?" To which I replied, "Can I please sing Johnny Be Good with you?" Holy crap, he says yes. I'm a 4th grader on stage at a huge venue with the father of rock and roll about to sing one of his most famous songs with him. He starts the opening riff. I'm shaking, but not from stage fright. No, it was from sheer shock of being in this situation. I start singing. The crowd erupts. I bellow out the song. At the end, Chuck asks me, "What's your name, young man?" I tell him my name. The crowd starts cheering my name for a solid minute. It was the most incredible feeling and hands down the best gift I've ever received. Now, personally, I'm more of a fan of Maybelline, why can't you be true? Oh, Maybelline, why can't you be true? You just started doing the things you used to do. People, what is your strangest glitch in the Matrix moment that cannot be explained? When my son was about 4 years old, one night he started hounding me to ring Nana. He had never asked to call her before, so I just put him off for an hour or so and he came back and insisted that I call her. Turns out she was sitting on her lounger experiencing a massive tachycardia event and couldn't breathe. I called an ambulance and met her at the hospital. The same week, she had a pacemaker and defibrillator unit implanted to fix the problems. To this day, I cannot explain what drove him to get me to call, but I'm very glad he did. He doesn't even remember it. I don't know why, for the life of me, but it just took me 20 times to clearly say he doesn't even remember it. This happened to people I know, not me directly. A woman who works with my mom was out doing her grocery shopping one night and ran into me at the supermarket. She told my mom about the encounter the next day and asked why I didn't recognize her, as we saw each other once every few weeks when I'd go and help with any heavy lifting at their store. My mom confirmed that it couldn't have been me as I was at home. The woman also mentioned feeling oddly nauseous during the interaction. I was about 16 or 17 at the time. Another woman I know said she didn't know I walked through the park near her home after work. Dumbfounded by her observation, I listened as she explained that she'd seen me every so often after work, walking briskly through a large park, which I do know of but have only driven past, as if I was exercising. She said I walked close by her the previous evening and she was going to speed up to catch up with me and say hello, but as she started to, she began to feel ill, so she slowed down and then sat on a bench for a few minutes. By then, she'd lost sight of me. This happened about 3 years ago and both occurrences were miles apart. I can't believe I forgot about this, but it happened when I was 20. I was living on campus on the ground floor of a 3-story building. There were only 36 people in the building, so I knew everyone by sight at least when this happened. A new guy moved into the 3rd floor. We'd exchanged pleasantries and I knew his name and what floor he lived on, but not much else. I was coming out of the front door one morning and he was coming down the stairs and said, "Oh, I just saw your sister going up the stairs." I asked him what he meant and he said, "Your sister? She's here all the time? She wears her hair the same as you?" I used to change my hair a lot. At the time, it was midway down my back and fire truck red. There was nobody on campus with hair like mine. I noped out and went back inside. You know, it might be hard to accept for some people, because I know we live in a time where everyone likes to think they're a special little snowflake, but some of us just have that face, that body, and even that sense of fashion. You just look like a lot of people. I stopped at a gas station on my way to work one morning. I take out my debit card and take my car keys with me and leave everything in the car. Pay for my stuff and throw my debit card in the metal cup I have in my car. Literally half a second later, I look down and my card is gone. Pulled apart everything trying to look for it and couldn't find it. I go to work and go home to find it sitting on my desk. Double check my bank account to make sure it was the card I used, and it was. To this day, I still have no idea what happened. I mean, I can't explain that either really, unless, you're a liar. Saw a dude with no face driving a car. No features at all. It was just blank. I did more than just glance at him. I was staring. Just smooth skin and a men's haircut. I've never told anyone because it's so ridiculous sounding and I don't think people would believe me. Probably a rational explanation for it, I suppose, but man, what the hell? Maybe some kind of prankster or whatever trying to freak people out or something, or maybe you were doing something you shouldn't have been doing while driving. I've posted this before, but my family go to a garden center near my town every winter. Pretty Christmas lights. Well, this one year, the day before we were supposed to go, I had a dream that on our way, the tire of the car came off and we crashed hard. It was such a horrible, graphic dream. My mom's leg had been crushed, my dad stuck, etc. Well, I told my mom in the morning and she joked that she'd checked the wheels. She actually must have. She said the car had felt weird and the dream unnerved her. Lo and behold, the tire is loose and needs to be taken to a mechanic. Really weird experience, especially as I've never had a dream feel so real before. Well, you know what they say, with great power comes great responsibility. Now come over to my house and dream up some winning lottery numbers if you would be so kind. Once I walked into my living room from the hallway, saw my mum in the kitchen pouring a bowl of something fully clothed, important to the story, and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" She ignored me, put something in the fridge, and walked into her room. I figured she didn't hear me and walked into my room. Not even 2 minutes later, she walked into my room, soaking wet, in a towel, and tells me she had fallen asleep in the bathtub and had just woken up. Weirdest crap ever. That sounds pretty believable, actually. Year 3 or 4 at school in the UK, so I'd have been like 7 or something. Anyway, at the end of school we all had to line up in our year groups in the yard and we would be led by our teacher to the front of the school and either onto the bus or picked up. The pathway from the back to the front of the school was narrow, so all single file. I was walking along, chatting and laughing with my peers in front and behind of me. Next thing I know, I'm stood on the path, completely alone. The teacher comes running back from around the front of the school and says, "Greg, hurry up, you'll miss the bus." I'd literally missed/skipped a few minutes of time. I've always remembered it. The answer is simple, my friend. We are nothing more than sleeping slaves. Diavolo is doing whatever he be doing in Italy and using King Crimson all over the goddamn place. But in all seriousness, this has happened to me as well. I've blanked out going from point A to B and had no recollection of my journey to point B. It's something that happens. People just go on automatic sometimes. But it certainly doesn't change how jarring it can be. Not the strangest, but the most recent. Early last month, I went online to pay a bill, like I've done for years. I get to the last page before finishing and the web page freaks out, with a multitude of display issues before finally receiving an error message. After several attempts to pay, I give up, assuming the site is having issues. I go back 2 days later and pay my bill, and it goes through normally, with me getting my usual text and email notifying me I paid. I'm very confused a few weeks later when I check my email and find a notice from the company whose bill I paid with a semi-threatening email saying the bill is due that day and do I need to set up a payment plan. I've been dealing with the company for almost a decade and have never been late in paying. I check my credit card account and there's no record of me paying, nor are the text or email I received still in my records. I pay the bill and chalk it up to a senior moment on my part. Last week I got my one credit card bill. It says I never paid my last bill, so now I've got that bill to pay plus the interest. I find my previous bill open but with the invoice in place in my living room. Here's why I'm posting. I'm physically disabled and can't drive, and I always pay that credit card bill in person after they messed up my payment years ago. A family member always takes me to my credit union to pay that bill, and like me, he remembers us going down to pay the bill. They say I never paid. He and I even remember a conversation we had on the way to the credit union and going grocery shopping afterwards, but yet the bill is unpaid and the bill is in my possession still. I don't know what to say except that credit card unions can be tricksy little rats. We'll call them rats. In my area, there are apiaries. An old girlfriend and I were driving down a backcountry road exploring the area, and we both saw an old lady in dark clothes tending to a few beehives in an open field not far from the road, maybe 50 yards or so from the road. She was covered in bees. I slowed down, the bees covered the woman, and then the bees all flew away and the lady was gone. There was nowhere she could have vanished to or hid, and we both saw it happen. Answer: that was no little old lady tending that beehive, that was the pain from Metal Gear Solid 3. When I was 23, I went to a week's workshop with uni abroad to Barcelona. The workshop was based in an obscure part of the city, and I always thought I'd never be able to find that area again. Fast forward about 15 years, I score a job in Barcelona. Get off the plane, go to the hotel near my new office, and it's across from said workshop. I worked there for 3 years, and when that job ends, I move country again for about 5 years. About a month ago, I was invited to an interview for a job, which I'm now in the process for, and guess where the offices are? Yep, around the corner from the workshop that I thought I'd never find again. It's got me wondering if it's coincidence or should I just move to that area until I work out why the universe keeps sending me there. This is probably my favorite one so far. The universe just sending you back to a specific place, like in another country regularly, is just kind of cool.
Woke up one morning, went into the living room, and there was a pile of at least 100 maggots in the middle of the living room. Fat fuckers, too. No idea where they came from, or perhaps more disturbingly, what they had eaten to get that size.
Well, that would certainly freak me the hell out if it was the first thing I woke up to in the morning. Wife and I were driving out of Texas to come back home to Ohio. We stop at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Kind of a rundown little place. Wife goes in while I'm filling up. I finish and pay at the pump and decide to head in and use the restroom real quick. I walk out and the wife is at the checkout paying. Wall up and the guy just starts looking at me and then calls me out by my full name.
Lieutenant?
Yeah?
Your name is Lieutenant Drinks-A-Lot, right?
Yeah? Do we know each other?
Nope.
Then how do you know my name?
I don't know.
Wife and I look at each other and we both get the hell out of there. I don't have a common name. I had never been to that gas station, let alone that town in Texas, ever. Every time my wife and I think about it, we can't explain it. Now, I've never worked a register, but I think that maybe when he paid to fill it up, it may have come up with his name if he paid by card at the pump, so the dude just took a shot in the dark and was like, oh, this is that dude. I don't know how he'd know that he's a lieutenant unless I know that you can get different titles on your debit and credit cards and whatnot, so I don't know if lieutenant is an option that you can have or something. It's the most rational explanation I can come up with, that's for sure.
After a bath, I went to put clothes on, blacked out and woke up on the floor, sitting upright against the sink and dressed. I have no idea what happened. I didn't feel sore anywhere like if I had fallen over, and it was as if I sat on the floor and dressed myself while I was unconscious. Felt like 20 minutes had passed, even though the bathroom still had steam in it. Kinda just shrugged it off, but I'll still think about it.
You probably just got up too fast, you silly cow. I'm not the kind of person to have a great many friends, but those friends I do keep are sacred to me. So one evening, I'm getting out of a Rotterdam subway to go to my apartment near there when I see an old friend, one I haven't seen in the flesh in a few years, heading into the subway. I call out his name. He turns, waves, and makes this call me gesture. Then the doors close and subway rides off. 30 seconds later, my phone rings. It was my friend who told me he'd just seen me getting the normal train he'd used to get home from the bar. Apparently, I had grinned, waved, gestured, call me, the doors shut, and the train drove off. I lived in Rotterdam, he lived in Enschede.
Well, looks like more doppelganger shenanigans are afoot.
In high school, I remember going to English and the teacher did roll call. She called my name and I raised my hand and said, I'm here. Then she stopped, saying, so he's not here then. My friend and I laughed because I was obviously here. Figured she was messing with me. That night, my mom got a call telling her I wasn't at class today. I was actually marked as absent. I go back to school the next day and tell my friend, Mrs. English teacher actually freaking counted me as absent. And he said, why wouldn't she? Thought to myself, you're not funny. But I just let it slide because I thought again I was being messed with. Then one of my friends sits down and asks, you feeling better today? Or were you just playing hooky? I was so confused. Then I go to my first hour and that teacher hands me the work I supposedly missed from that day. I looked in my bag and had the same stuff, guide and assignments already there. To this day. I don't know if I missed that day of school or not. I like to think that the teacher and the students, your friends, were conspiring against you to mess with you really, really badly. About a couple years ago, a friend sent me a video and he asked if I had a lost twin somewhere. It was a video made by amateur actors from the city I used to live in. There was this girl that looks just like me. She talked just like me and her part on the sketch consisted of telling a joke I used to tell at the time. I was freaked out of my mind. For some stupid reason I deleted that video and I haven't been able to find it anywhere. And God knows I spent an embarrassing number of hours trying to confirm it even existed in the first place. I kept this one in just as an example of a stupid one that I absolutely don't believe. And believe me, there are already a few that I'm like, very skeptical of, but some of them are pretty cool. Senior year of high school, 30-minute lunch. My buddy and I drove all the way from my school to McDonald's, normally about a 10-minute drive, so 20 minutes minimum there and back. But we stopped by my house in between the school and McDonald's. I grab a shirt, change, leave, drive down the street, get into an altercation with a guy who we flipped off for tailgating. A shooty bang bang is pulled. We think he was across the street. Looked like a shooty bang bang, but who knows? His wife in the passenger seat starts yelling at him. We part ways. Go to McDonald's and order food, eat in the parking lot, decide we are late regardless. We had no access to the time in my car and our phones were in our lockers at school. We also were frequent ditchies or tardy kids. Turns out this all occurred in 18 minutes on the dot. It's freaking impossible, but it happened. My buddy and I still talk about it to this day, saying we went through a wormhole or some crap. Or my Nissan, rest in peace, somehow could time travel or slow down time. Time-traveling Nissan is not nearly as cool as a time-traveling DeLorean. I was at a gas station getting a coffee. I absolutely love gas station coffee, and this was somewhere I always stop before heading to work. I went to pay for my coffee and I tap my card. The lady at the till tells me it was declined. I try inserting it with my PIN because maybe my tap wasn't working. The lady said it was declined again. There was no one else in the gas station at that time, so I'm like, hold up, let me check my online banking. Because I'd just gotten paid and I knew I had money. I go to my online banking and it says that I paid. I show her the transaction and she starts insisting that it didn't go through on her end. Like, okay lady, I'm not paying for the same coffee twice. Next day, I go in to grab another coffee and the lady tells me that I stole the coffee the other night, but doesn't make me pay for it. I am angry because I just got a lecture when I know the money for the coffee came out of my account. I check my online banking later and there was no transaction for the coffee. Not so much a glitch in reality as it is a glitch in your bank account. Biking back from school one day with a friend and we were talking when suddenly I got a really strange case of déjà vu. I remembered the exact moment as if it had happened once before and knew what he was going to say next. Then he said it. Nothing mind-blowing, but more than 14 years later, I still can't explain it. See, I would explain that by saying that the friend was probably talking about something that you were only passively listening to before, but now that you were actually focused and subconsciously aware of what they were talking about before, you kind of knew what they were going to say next. This happened to me several years ago while I was living in California and working a great job in a downtown coffee house. I loved everything about that job. I worked with fantastic people and our shop was located in the city's historic district in a very old, very beautiful building that had once been a hotel in the 1800s, but had since been converted into apartments, lofts, and of course, the big coffee house on the main floor. Being an early birdie and living only a couple blocks away from the coffee house, I was always scheduled to work the opening shift, which started at 4:15 a.m. It was the most unpopular shift, but it happened to be my absolute favorite one because I loved walking to work in the quiet of the early mornings as the rest of the city was sound asleep. Normally, downtown was quite loud and busy, full of people and constant activity, but in the early hours of the morning, it was still and silent, and I felt as if I was the only person in existence walking through a ghost town. Every day, I arrived 10 or 15 minutes early for my shift and would wait for my manager on the patio outside of the shop. It was always just the two of us working that early shift, and my manager was often running a little bit behind and never arrived before I did. But I didn't mind at all. I liked to spend some time by myself on the patio outside of the darkened shop, gathering my thoughts while I waited for him to walk up with his keys to unlock the door. One morning as I was walking to work and approaching our building, I noticed that the coffee house was brightly lit up as all the lights were already turned on and shining through the store's giant glass windows. I was about 10 minutes early that morning, so I was very surprised to see that my manager had arrived before me and had already started opening up the shop. I walked up to the glass door and pulled on the handle to let myself in, only to find that it was locked shut. That wasn't really unusual, as we often kept the doors of the employee entrance and main entrance locked while we got everything ready for the day and went through our morning procedures until 5 a.m., which was our official opening time. What was unusual, though, was the sound of music I could clearly hear drifting through the speakers inside the store. This was during the holiday season, so we were playing Christmas music throughout the day, but on this particular morning, I could hear the Christmas music already playing its familiar loop at a rather high volume inside the store. This was during the holiday season, so we were playing Christmas music throughout the day, but we never turned it on until around 9 or so in the morning, out of respect for all of the tenants living in the apartment above us. But on this particular morning, I could hear the Christmas music already playing its familiar loop at a rather high volume inside the store. I thought it was odd, but decided that maybe my manager was just feeling extra festive that day and wanted to listen to some tunes while we worked. I knocked on the employee's entrance door and waited for my manager to come and let me in. I looked through the glass and watched for him. He didn't come, so I knocked again and waited some more. He still didn't appear, so I knocked again and again. I then walked to the main entrance door and tried knocking on those with no luck. I checked my watch and saw that I had 5 minutes until I needed to clock in. I knocked again, much louder this time, and looked inside through the glass door for any signs of my manager. And that's when I heard the muffled sound of voices coming from the back of the store where the kitchen of our coffee shop was located. At that quiet, early hour in the morning, every sound seems to be amplified, and what I could distinctly hear was 2 male voices talking and laughing together. That was very unusual, as I had mentioned before that it was normally just me and my manager who opened up the shop. But I figured someone had probably just needed to pick up an extra shift. I knocked yet again and continued to listen to the sounds coming from the coffee shop. The men kept talking and laughing loudly. They seemed to be having a really great time. In addition to the music and the talking and the laughter, I began to hear the sound of clanging dishes and also the sprayer of the 3-compartment steel kitchen sink being turned on and off, which was very, very unusual, as there would be no dishes to wash before the store had even opened. I was also confused as to why the manager and whoever was with him were in the kitchen in the back of the store, because so much of our opening procedures, setting up the pastry cases, brewing the coffee, preparing everything for the espresso machine, were done at the front of the store, where I was waiting to be let inside. At this point, I was getting a bit irritated, as I was supposed to start work in just a few minutes, and I needed to punch in on our time clock. I hated clocking in late for work. I dug out my phone and dialed my manager's cell number. He didn't pick up, so I dialed the number to our coffee shop instead, and the 2 phones inside the shop, one in the back office and one up the front by the register, started ringing. Once, twice, 3 rings and no answer. Now 4 rings and 5. I hung up and I immediately dialed again, annoyed that they were making such a racket in there with the music and all the talking and the laughter that they probably couldn't even hear the phone at all. Just as before, nobody answered. I hung up and redialed the store for a 3rd time. The phone rang and went unanswered, and so I banged on the door yet again to no avail. I looked at my watch, and I was officially late for work. As I was standing in the front of the locked door with my phone against my ear, becoming more and more irritated, I noticed a pair of headlights reflecting in the glass rolling up behind me. I turned around and saw something I did not expect at all. It was my manager. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said as he climbed out of the driver's seat and shut his car door and hustled up to the shop's entrance. "I tried to get here as fast as I could," he said as he moved towards me and fumbled with his keys trying to find the one to the shop door. "You're mad," he said. "I can tell. I'm really sorry." Completely confused, I put my phone away and turned to head into the store with him, and that's when I lost my breath for a minute. The coffee shop was totally dark. None of the lights were on, not a single light, and it was dead quiet. The Christmas music had stopped, and so had the voices and laughter. All of the loud noise had disappeared. Every sound I had been listening to just seconds before had suddenly vanished. "I promise I'll be here on time tomorrow," my manager said as he fits his key into the lock. "I'll even be early. You'll be shocked." Little did he know that I could not possibly be more shocked to see him than I was at that very moment, as he opened the door to the silent, completely empty coffee house. Perhaps another individual with a deep love for creative writing. Cashiers, what's been the most interesting reaction you've experienced when someone's gotten their card declined? Not necessarily a bad customer behavior story, but one that I'll share anyway. I was a cashier at a chain hardware store, the big orange one. A mom, dad, and a few kids, all in ill-fitting clothes, but pleasant as all get out, come up to the register and look like they're having a rough day. They have 3 carts full of merchandise, all basic stuff. One of everything you would need if you were moving out or starting from scratch. Toilet paper, cleaning supplies, mop, broom, light bulbs, carts full of just everything you can imagine. I ask, "You guys moving to a new place?" The mother says, "Actually, our house burned down." I apologize for their circumstances and continue to ring up their items. The total ends up over $1,000. I run their card and it's declined. At this particular department store, you're allowed to discount a total up to $50 without manager approval. So I do that and it's still declined. The parents look like they're at their complete breaking point, but are taking it so gracefully for a family with 3 kids who just lost everything. The mom tears up and starts calmly making decisions about what to put back. I asked them to hang tight, pulled the manager aside and explained the situation. The manager and I walked back to the family and they are still eliminating things. And my manager took 50% of the entire transaction, then added a 10% senior discount and a 10% military discount on top of everything. The card then worked and they were incredibly grateful and nearly in tears as I bagged everything up. I'll never forget how awesome that manager was. I didn't even really have to explain anything after I said, "So their house burnt down?" And she immediately jumped into action to show some compassion. A good old story about human kindness and compassion. Well, ain't that just peachy now? I was working at a mega bookstore. A man came up with 2 or 3 serious philosophy books. Then he flicked his credit card at me. Don't do that to a cashier. Just don't. I said nothing and swiped his card. It declined. The screen asked me to call Amex. I tell the customer I have to call. He hisses at me not to say it so loud. I had a phone with me, so I made the call right there standing at the register. Amex tells me to confiscate the card, if you believe you can do that. So I say, sorry, they tell me I have to take your card. He screams, "My mother is a crunt minus the R. She cut me off." I cut the card in half. I still feel good about that day. Literally cannot stand that attitude. This person sounded like they were just a little jerk, so I don't blame their mum for cutting them off. The fact of the matter is, people, your parents may have brought you into this world, but that doesn't mean they have to be responsible for you forever. I've talked about it before, but personal responsibility is just something that you have to accept eventually when it comes to living your life and being responsible for yourself and the way that you behave and treat other people. We see a fairly clever smoke and mirrors routine at my liquor store. Customer comes in, walks to the spirits hard liquor section and puts 1 bottle under their shirt while packing up a second and walking back to the register with it. They attempt to buy the second bottle with a card that they know will decline. Then they say they have to call their bank and dial a number as they leave. Misdirection works. These goddamn alcoholic criminals can learn misdirection and deception, but they can't learn the 12 steps. Cashier at a drive-thru. I took his card at the first window, told him it was declined. He says, "All right, I'll just go, I guess." He pulls up to the next window, demands his food, then slams on the gas, pulling away, almost crashing into another car. That boy wanted his Wendy's. If you are ever hungry enough to steal, get fruits and vegetables and things. I remember I was in America fairly recently in LA and I met this homeless guy. At least I assume he was homeless because he was pretty dirty and preaching the word of God. Anyway, I decided to buy this guy some food at like a bodega or something. He's picking out cereal packets and everything. I say to him, "Oi, take a banana." And he's like, "What? No, I don't want a banana." I'm like, "Take a goddamn banana. It's full of potassium. It's good for you." Like seriously, if you're gonna steal food, get something that is wholesale good for you, not goddamn Wendy's or McDonald's or something like that, I swear. I had this one lady who just kept making me re-scan it over and over and over again until eventually my manager had to shoo her away. She was clearly desperate, but I worked at a store where nothing we sold was necessary for daily life. Literally nothing, so I didn't have much sympathy. Liquor store? No, we had like ugly fake plants and furniture and random decorative things. I'd be sympathetic for alcohol. That was multiple comments on the same thing, but I felt like it was necessary for the context, and yeah, I wouldn't be that sympathetic about that either. I was at a fairly uncrowded Walmart in a nice neighborhood at about 11 p.m. and my card didn't get declined, but there was something strangely wrong with it. It was the only form of payment I had. The cashier kept trying to punch in numbers and doing all sorts of computer stuff, and he needed to see my driver's license for some reason. It was taking forever, and I became overwhelmed with paranoia that it was a Jason Bourne type situation, that I swiped my card and an alert came up on the screen with a big red X and a code that meant he needed to stall as long as possible until men in suits could surround the building and I could be apprehended. I was sweating bullets and thought about running, but then it finally went through and I could take my milk and Reese's home. My man out here buying some Reese's Pieces and he thinks he's gonna get Jason Bourne. My God, buddy, I need to tell you something. It's okay, but you are not the one. Mostly it's just, oh no, that should definitely go through. Try it again. Fails. Let me check the bank. Calls and moans at the bank for a bit. Now try. Works. Now that I think about it, my card has never been definitively declined. I've had times where the tap doesn't work or it's like, you're suddenly spending a lot of money. Is this actually you doing this? Yes, it is. Okay, and then it works again. I had one lady who screamed and accused me of purposely making her card decline to embarrass her, as if a 16-year-old making minimum wage somehow could manage that or would have any reason to do that to a stranger. I don't doubt that, but teenagers can be excessively cruel. Back in the 90s, I worked for Rumblos. Had a guy pick out a new TV and VCR, wanted warranty. Nice easy sale. Trouble is, I noticed the signatures were a bit different, and in those days, anything over £100 you had to phone through for authorization. So I did, and the card was stolen. Lady at the other end of the phone said I was as much as possible supposed to hold the line and keep the customer in the store as the police had been called. So I say to the guy, sorry, it seems their system is playing up, so it's going to take a while for the the authorization to come through. He seems fine with it. Waited and waited what must have been 20 minutes, and another customer said, "You know what, mate? You're making it look like he's stolen that card." I told him that I was just told to wait for the authorization code and that would take a while, because their system, yada yada yada. Card bearer pegged it out of the shop. I could now explain to the Good Samaritan that the card was stolen and in the nicest way possible that he was a butt and he should keep his thoughts to himself. Got paid £50 for the card, handed it to the police who turned up about 5 minutes after he'd bailed, told them what he was wearing, but he was long gone. Wow, both those men were tossers in the end. Several years ago, the day after Christmas at Target, a woman has 3 carts full of marked down Christmas merchandise. My scanner was broken, so I had to hand type each UPS code in by hand. Needless to say, it took a while. The customer snottily complains about how much I was inconveniencing her by taking so long. Finally finished ringing up her purchases, and she hands me a card. Declined. She had me run it again. Declined. Again. Sighing outrageously, she pulls out her wallet and flips it open. I swear the woman had like 20 credit cards. She starts wiggling her fingers over them like she's picking a tarot card. Hands a new card to me. Declined. Another card. Declined. Has me try several cards more. All declined. Finally, super frustrated, she writes me a check. In mounting glee, I tell her it's declined also. She slams her front card away and stomps out the exit. Lady behind her asks if her items are up for grabs. I say, yep, and proceed to watch as a horde of people ravage the contents of the carts. It was awesome, like watching sharks eat chum. I still think people are generally better off without credit cards because some people just can't be trusted. I had a customer that was yelling in multiple languages in my lobby demanding a refund onto his gift card. We had already made his drinks, but he said it took too long. Smoothie shop midsummer. It's going to take a bit as always. The guy wouldn't stop yelling, was trying to take other customers' smoothies to replace his, even though his were in his hands, all good. After trying to convince him that I absolutely cannot give him a refund on the gift card without the actual gift card and number, he finally walked up to the register, deliberately knocking over 2 stanchions with the guided rope between them, then proceeded to flick the 2 gift cards at me, both missing and going over my shoulder. The craziest part is in the end, he actually didn't pay on the gift cards. He paid in cash. Wanted the smoothies refunds put on these non-reloadable gift cards, but also to keep the smoothie. At that point, I went to hand him back the cards. He dropped his smoothie, one was mostly gone, and kept the other, and just walked out the door, leaving $50 in gift cards. Utterly astounding interaction. Yes, I agree. What an ignoramus. I had a lady break down and start crying. While she was in the line, she already looked like her world was falling apart. I don't remember what it was she brought, but I don't think it was more than $30, and the guy behind her offered to pay for it. More crying ensued. You know, I'm sure most people would feel sympathetic to this crying woman, but I bet there's someone out there, a Squidward of a human being, who's just like, okay, lady, let's keep the line moving. We've already established you can't afford it. Go on, leave. That'd be awful. But even then, as cruel as that might seem, it's not even the wrong response to have to it. I was moving from Tennessee back home to Ohio. I had my entire life in my car and it got towed in the college town I made a stop in to have lunch with a friend. I had $100 to get home, costing me $120 to get my car out. My friend covered the $20, but I only had a half a tank of gas to get home. Was counting change at the gas station I stopped at. Needed about $10 to get home, I believe, and started crying and having a panic attack. Went to the bathroom and came back. The cashier told me the guys behind me filled up my tank and to have a safe trip home. More crying, and it was just a really good feeling to know there are decent human beings in the world. Well, if I had an interaction that sweet on my travels back home, I'd be singing all the goddamn way. Just the other day, I had a lady whose card got declined. Her response was to try it about 6 more times, then it hit her. She forgot to take her card out of her pocket, and long story short, she managed to demagnetize her card. Her solution was to run home and grab cash, which wouldn't have been a big deal, except she ran her food stamp card first, and the register physically will not let me do anything except finish tendering. So I had to cash her out, return the non-food items, hold them until she got back, and re-ring them. And yes, she spent a good 5 minutes ranting about how I was conspiring against her until she figured out what had happened. Because a lot of people are asking, I couldn't key in her card number manually because I have to have the card in my hand to do it, and the customer refused to give it to me. All the while, this woman is accusing this person. She's picturing that if she accuses them enough, he's going to turn around and go, "Kuna dioda!" On the receiving end, I was working in construction pretty far from home, and for lunch I went to get an $8 custom sandwich from a fancy grocery store. At the register, my card got declined, and when it did, I immediately checked my phone and saw I had a zero balance. I told the lady, "Sorry, I can't pay for this," and she said, "Wait, hold on," and called a few people over, and she ended up paying it for me. I still remember her face. I tried to pay her back after my next payday, but she said, "No, I don't want it. I like to help, and I imagine no other people will do the same." I will never forget her. She turned what would have been a depressing day into something I will never forget. I was told to be quiet and polite when explaining that a card wasn't working, so when the transaction was declined, I tried to keep my voice down. Older gentleman with family asked me to speak up. He still couldn't hear me. His family laughed and said something like, "You daft bugger, the card's been declined." He laughed and said he used the wrong card. Fortunately, the other one worked. At least it was a positive reaction. Uneventful. All I have to say is, English? I don't know how it is now, but 20 plus years ago when I worked as a cashier, if we called in for a manual verify, the only thing we ever said was a code X decline. We were never told what the codes meant, but apparently one of them was a tip-off to the verifying team to send the police. I found that out when I had one that was taking an extremely long time to go through, kept asking all sorts of stuff like confirming our address and systemic delays. When the popo showed up, I knew what was going on. Phoning in for authorization was handy. In the 90s, I had a couple young guys come into our music store. "My aunt says I can buy a DJ setup as a graduation present." He proceeds to show me this handwritten note on a napkin. "I allow my nephew to buy a DJ setup as a graduation present." Naturally, he starts picking out the best of everything. Or when there were two great items, each with a slightly different advantage, he took both. The buddy had some stuff thrown in for himself as well. Full PA system, stands, cables, mics, the controller, the pile gets deep. So I run the card in the imprinter, make the call, actually to the police, while an employee distracts him with information on certain pieces. I hung up and told him for the high amount they had to call me back with the authorization number. It is typical, should be 5 minutes. Cops showed up, the kids turned white, they get escorted outside. Turns out they were out swimming at a local beach and stole the credit card from a lady's purse. I'm just gonna say, screw them kids. Like, it's one thing to steal physical money from someone, but to attempt to accrue massive credit card debt on someone else's card, that's just scummy. I know that the banks usually reimburse you if you get found being a victim of fraud, but they deserve a swift kick in the nether regions. I was 16 years old, working for minimum wage at the Jesus Chicken restaurant. A guy and his daughter came in and she was in a gymnastics uniform. They order and she starts telling me all excited about how every time she has an out-of-town competition, they try the local chicken chain together. Their total was only $16, but his card got declined. He pulled out a second, but it declined too. She looks disappointed and he tells me to cancel the order. But it was only $16, so I run to the back and grab my own card and run it through. They get their food and he lingers behind to thank me and tells me that he's going through a divorce and they probably wouldn't have gotten to continue their tradition if I hadn't stepped in. I felt good doing that for someone without expecting anything in return, but to my surprise, right at closing that night, my manager comes to the back and says someone is asking for me. The guy came back and gave me $30 and thanked me for making his daughter's day. Since a lot of people seem to have questions about the money and/or validity of this event, I'd like to address them. My card was a debit, not credit. Don't know why that matters. When the guy came back at closing to give me the money, he had plenty of cash on him. My guess is he had it back at his hotel. He thanked me for making his daughter's day because he'd been going through a rough divorce and his soon-to-be ex had most likely cancelled his cards and had been pulling stunts like that a lot, hence the backup stash of cash. I paid for the food instead of having them come back because my parents had been talking about paying things forward in our family, and I wanted to do something nice for someone besides it was only $16. Jesus Chicken is Chick-fil-A. Yeah, I admittedly just wanted to know if Jesus Chicken was a real place, so I'm glad they answered that. I'm disappointed though. Not me, but an elderly lady in front of me at a Walgreens. She had mostly food items when her card declined. She was gracious and simply pulled a couple items aside. It went through, but I saw that the items were nuts and jerky. You know, protein sources. And I started imagining her being on a fixed income and being malnourished, so I paid for them myself and then found her in the parking lot and said, "Ma'am, excuse me, but I think you left this behind," and handed her the bag. I walked away quickly before she could say anything. I have another story about how I bought a guy a Slurpee at a 7-Eleven because his card declined for something that literally costs a couple bucks and my heart broke for him. I figure this is my neighborhood, these are my neighbors. I know what it's like to be broke as all get out. If I can spare a couple of dollars, then why not?
Ooh, you big softy.
I bought a girl that was crying a ticket to a big music festival after hearing her out. She'd been conned and lost 300 euros. It would have been her 5th time and all her friends were already inside, but her ticket was declined. I still remembered the times that I needed to plan stuff like that in advance and save up. So I told her to hold on, made a few calls and told her to hang on, and tell me a bit about what she was looking forward to keep her from stressing out, telling her over and over that it was going to be okay. 15 minutes later, I got a call and a text with a scannable ticket. Walked in with her, brought her 100 euros worth of coupons, gave her a hug, and left. Now, my country is pretty small, but this was 300 kilometers away from home. I just felt like doing something nice and didn't want her to think that there was anything more to it. Almost 5 months later, she ended up finding me at my store. We talked, I thought she was cute, nothing more happened for another 6 months. A week before the festival, she showed up again. She'd moved to a city a few kilometers away from me for uni, so we lived within minutes of each other now. Went to the festival together and had fun. I fell for her badly. Asked her to go on a date with me while we were both high, ended up taking her to the fanciest restaurant at the festival. Had amazing food. Got pretty drunk later, and that's how I met my girlfriend. Definitely better than most stories, and it's not the first time being nice has paid off, but it's not why I help others. It's only 9 days until the festival, and I want to tell this story to someone. I might ask her to marry me. I'm a wreck right now. Haven't slept in 2 days. Just needed to tell someone. Sorry if it bothered you. I don't know why your story would bother anyone unless they're a petty, jealous, loveless little goblin man. My only thought is, while I am fairly generous, I would never spend that much money on a stranger. This happened to me and I was mortified. In my defense, it wasn't declined due to lack of funds or available credit. I went to Nordstrom's or Macy's to pick up a few items for a holiday. I think the item in question was a purse for my mom. It wasn't expensive, but it wasn't cheap either, like $250 to $300. I had placed the order online for pickup in store. Walk in, talk to the lady, get item, and go to the register. We tried to run my card, bam, declined. What? She runs it a few more times and still declined. I'm confused and a little embarrassed at this point. I call my bank, Wells Fargo, and ask them what is going on and why can't they push through the charge. They claimed the one I had expired. I read the expiration back to them and told them it was perfectly fine. It wasn't until later that the real story came out. Apparently, they detected fraud somewhere in my account, but no actual charge fraud, and decided to cancel my card and issue a new one. They did so without notifying me. They also said since it was a fraud hold, they couldn't push this transaction through, not even a one-time exception. I had to sullenly tell the teller that I would be back tomorrow. It was close to closing time for them. She gave me this look like I wasn't going to be back. That probably hurt the most. I went back the next day and bought the crap out of that purse. You go, girl. You buy that purse. You live your best life. You show that judgy teller. Not declined, but a card machine not working at Subway. Just happened a week ago. Walked into Subway, they had a big sign on the door, cash only, card machine malfunction. I, of course, didn't notice as I was on my phone. Ordered my sub and had an issue as I had no cash. So I went to the ATM down the street, got money, and ate my sub, no issue. Another guy walks in and the same thing happens to him. He also decides to go to the ATM down the street, only his card gets declined. He says it's because he was out of state and his bank wouldn't allow it. So he comes back to tell the lady, and she's really sorry. He gets really angry and walks out the door yelling, "Next time make the sign a little bigger so I don't waste all my effing time. Thanks a lot." I'm sure some people have had worse reactions to things like that, but I couldn't help but laugh. Yes, the sign could have been a little bit bigger, but when I walked back in after going to the ATM, I realized the sign was pretty damn decently sized. Could the cashier have asked each customer beforehand? Yeah, she started doing that after this guy was a butthole, but really, is it her fault that he wasn't paying attention? Luckily, I never come across this issue because I insist upon carrying at least a bit of cash around on me. And establishments that decide that they only take debit and credit card are frickin' moronic. Parents, have any of you regretted the names you have given your children? I used to work tech support with a guy whose name was Gandalf. In the 70s, when he was born, Tolkien wasn't even a nerd thing. It was a hippie thing. His parents were big hippies and loved the books. So they named him Gandalf. His sister's middle name is Galadriel. He said at first people rarely recognized the name. It was a weird name, sure, but few people knew he was named after a fictional wizard. Until the movies came out. He hates Peter Jackson. Well, for one thing, leave Peter Jackson alone. The only people that individual has to blame are their parents. And the other thing is, I don't know, maybe it's because I grew up with a name that is very nice, but people bullied me and ridiculed me for it for years. But I don't know. I think Gandalf could work. I think they can make it work. 12 years ago, we had twin boys. We knew one would be Thomas after my wife's uncle, but struggled to name the second. For about 28 hours, he was baby B. When we finally settled on Jeremiah, 2 days later, we introduced them to our pastor, and he said, "Oh, cute, Tom and Jerry." I looked at my wife, and we were both thinking, oh, we did not just do that, but we left it. My God, the fights those brothers must have had. My friend's parents met during the 60s, and they were/are crazy hippies, and they have practiced a lot of different religions. When my friend was born, they decided to give him 14 middle names: Dorsey, Abdul, Jaleel, Francis, Brian, Albert, Barney, Willie, Kowalski, Jeffrey, Faith, Lovestar, Breeze. He has a common first and last name, and they said all of that at graduation. Well, goddamn, they might have practiced a lot of different religions, but clearly the son took on Christianity because he honored the crap out of the name his mother and father gave him. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's a middle name. It's avoidable. I work in a social services agency that deals with children. The names I have seen are quite amazing. Along with random variations of names and brands of alcohol, you get some interesting biblical ones too. Like the 3 kids in one family named Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. The one that I cringed at the most, though, was this poor little girl named Erotica. They are not even giving her a chance. Oh, this makes me wonder if maybe there should be rules where it's like, oh, what's your baby's name? Oh, it's Erotica. Oh, I'm sorry, man, but this baby is immediately being taken to Child Protective Services. I think my mother regrets my name. She wanted to call me Sebastian, but my grandmother insisted she would call me Sebastart, but with a D. She caved and named me Joshua. So when we had our first son, we named him Sebastian. I've never seen my mother so happy. My grandmother calls him by his middle name. I think I'm more interested in the story of why grandmother hates the name Sebastian so much. Is it the name of a lover who scorned her, a mortal enemy, a dog she didn't like? There was a kid at my school called Internet Castle. This is not a joke, by the way. Internet Castle. Hopefully none of these people like giving out absolute full names or anything like that, but I can't help but worry a little bit, and maybe the producers will confirm this with me or not, but are we kind of doxing people by reading these? Well, my mother doesn't regret naming me Shaw. Doesn't seem so bad because it's a fair family name. But as my first name, it causes great confusion. For example, if I introduce myself to someone, I have to clarify that my name isn't actually Sean or Shaw. Then, of course, the conversation goes as follows. Yeah, it's spelled S-H-A-W. And they say, "Are you sure?" Which sounds exactly like "Are you sure?" in my regional accent. He drops an F-bomb at the end of this, but there's no real good supplement for an F-bomb just on its own. I work at a clinic with parental moms. Once baby is born, I help make sure they're coming in for appointments. I can't tell you the feelings I felt trying to schedule an appointment for Brenpen, the newborn. I mean, Brenpen sounds a bit silly, but I don't think anything's gonna beat naming your little girl Erotica. Like, it's gonna take something real bad for me to be like, yeah, that's worse than Erotica. My actual first name is Jeff. People think I'm from New Zealand and I'm saying Jeff. Thanks, Mom and Dad. It could still be worse. Consider your initials carefully. My surname begins with a W. My brother had a daughter and named her Jennifer Elizabeth. Pretty vanilla, huh? They got a ton of blankets and cups with Jew engraved on each piece. We aren't Jewish. That's pretty funny, yeah. My wife regrets my kid's initials, FCK, but I think his pickup line choices could be hilarious. My initials are FCK. All I need is you. Okay, yeah, that's really good, actually. Almost on topic, my Nigerian friend was telling me that when he was teaching in Louisiana, the black people would come up and ask him if their names meant anything back in Africa. Apparently, 2 African Americans were named after furniture, but he was nice about it and said something like Proud Lion and Lord of Many. Line of them was probably for the best, but I'm just picturing him looking them in the eye and be like, "You are footstool." My middle name is My Love. It's not my first name, but it still stuns people when I first tell them. That was a little ha-ha at the end, and I just felt like doing a Scooby-Doo laugh. My mother and stepfather picked out and agreed upon a name for my little sister while my mom was pregnant. Her middle name was supposed to be Kate. Stepman never said anything about it. He liked it, was fine with it. Baby gets born, birth certificate is being written out, mom's exhausted, so she lets baby's dad deal with it. A few weeks later, mom takes a look at the new social security card and birth certificate and flips her lid because the middle name on all this paperwork is Lay, even though that name had never come up in discussion. She didn't even know until she stumbled across it by accident quite a bit too late. My parents are hippies that grew up in the 70s. Thankfully, I got away with a reasonable name. Jem. I've seen Jem in the holograms. My 2 younger brothers are named Conan and Torald. Our parents have never expressed regret over any of our names, though. I'm a guy, and my parents were inspired by Harper Lee when naming me. They were really hoping for a girl, and the first choices for names were Kitty or Jem with a G. My dad said they didn't think of any boy names until after I was born. Then they remembered the character in To Kill a Mockingbird and changed Jem to Jem. Voila! Torald. A pretty cool name. And what is with these hippies naming their kids after fictional characters? I mean, even I have a name that's like it's not specifically, but I share a name with a few popular fictional characters. My first name is just a letter. It gets better. I have an identical twin brother, and his first name is also a letter. We each have normal middle names, but letters is first names. It's because my dad thought it looked elegant, and not typical letters. I'm talking about 3 of the last letters. Thanks, Dad. Filling out any sort of paperwork for damn near anything is a pain in the butt. I know I can change my name, but I don't want to go through that hassle when I'm already used to the crappy name I was given. To answer OP's question, my dad doesn't regret it, but my mom wishes he would have waited until after the epidural wore off from her C-section to name us. The names are X and Z, so much for privacy. I posted this as a reply, but I thought I should address the justified claims indicating my mom might have gone along with the letters X and Z as first names. So I asked my mom why she was out. She's 5 foot and 95 pounds, she's an emergency room physician, and when the day arrived for my twin and I to be born, she didn't have any contractions. Typically, twins aren't carried full term, but here we are 9 months later in full term. The obstetrician decided that a cesarean would be the safest choice considering my mother was 40 at the time. The anesthesiologist administered the epidural, but it was too large a dose for my mom, seeing as she's such a tiny person. When my mother was having a hard time breathing, she told the anesthesiologist that she knew the area above the diaphragm had been numbed and started to panic because she couldn't breathe, and so the anesthesiologist administered a dose of Valium, so my mom became unconscious. When she awoke, she realized for the first time that my dad definitely married up. I ain't even gonna say anything about the names of that. Overall, I'm not gonna insult people for the names that they're given or anything. The worst one so far, as I've said, it's erotica. It's still gonna be erotica by the end of this, I imagine. But goddamn, what's with these men and just not discussing with their wives what they're gonna name their children or just going rogue? A friend's middle name is Baldrick. His parents thought it would be funny after watching too much Blackadder. For the uninitiated, Blackadder is a really funny English television series set around the 1500s because Queen Elizabeth the first is a main character in it, and then there was Blackadder Goes Forth where it's set in the trenches of World War II. Anyway, Baldrick is basically a massive idiot who usually screws things up, or maybe inadvertently kinda helps in his own stupid way. My legal name was Carne Asada Jones. I had it changed at 18. They basically called him Sliced Beef, for those who don't know. You know what? I'm actually gonna give that name second place for worst name on this list. It's still behind erotica, but not bad, not bad. My friend and her brother are from Taiwan. When they moved to Australia, they were young. Their father chose Western-sounding names for them. My friend ended up with a relatively normal, if old-fashioned name, but he got her brother's name from a thesaurus. His name is Roget. Also, my ex's sister was born in Ethiopia, and whoever filled out the birth certificate must not have had very good English because her name has about 4 times as many vowels as it strictly needs. And once I saw a girl working in a fast food restaurant with a name tag that read alimony. I have a mate whose name is Irwin. Not horrible, but his brother's is Irvin. Okay, personally, I gotta say, I actually really like the name Roget. I think that sounds cool, but Owen, there's nothing wrong with the name, and Irvin is fine too, I guess, but when I hear the name Owen, all I'm getting are flashes of that kid from bloody Billy and Mandy. My best friend named her firstborn son Jaden. When she told me the name, I asked her if she really wanted to do that. She said yes. That and her husband liked the name but wanted to make it a little different by adding an additional N. She now regrets it. The fact that she regrets it shouldn't bring me joy, but it does. Good luck on those biz cards, little guy. I am not quite sure what's actually wrong with that name. It looks a little bit silly on paper, I guess, but everyone in the comments below even is just oh, this name sucks. I knew a girl in high school named Cassiopeia. People called her Cass for short. I got why she was named that. Her dad was an astronomer by profession. There's not a single thing wrong with that name. It's kind of cute, if anything. I once knew a guy in high school whose last name was Sweat, and the poor dude's parents made his first name Richard. That's right. Connect the dots. See, I don't think that's that bad really, because it's just the nickname that everyone knows goes with that for some reason, but that's not their name. But, of course, it is unfortunate. My ex and I had a great marriage until it fell apart 14 years in. Up to that point, the worst thing we ever fought about was baby names and paint colors. She wanted our first to be Zebulon Zachariah. Not even kidding. We fought and fought about it. She was dead serious, and I was completely baffled as to how she thought that was a good idea. Finally talked her into a more sane first name and conceded Zachary is a middle name. Second child, she wanted D'Artagnan. Little Dart, she would say. Oh, hell no. We fought over this one while she was in labor. On the way to the hospital. She wasn't giving up. I won that one too with something not common but sane at least. Third child, she was back on the D'Artagnan train. Fought for 9 solid months. Thank God that one was a girl. Okay, Zebulon, kinda ridiculous, but D'Artagnan? Ooh, Dart. Darty boy, D'Artagnan, my friend. Nah, D'Artagnan sounds cold as fur. Maybe you could shorten Zebulon to just Zeb. That sounds kinda cool. Just Zeb, though. Do not put Zebulon on the birth certificate. I went to a summer camp with a guy called Raymond. Seriously, first name Raymond, second name Raymond. Naturally, we gave him hell for it. Me. So, were your parents drunk or something? Raymond squared. I was named after a very well-respected relative, actually. Me. So, were his parents drunk? He didn't talk to me much after that. 10 out of 10 roasting, I'll give you that, but see, this is why I don't really make fun of people's names or anything like that, because you do not control your name when you are born. I'm not going to take the mick out of someone for something that they didn't have a choice in. My husband and I had a deal. If it was a girl, I got to pick, and if it was a boy, he did. Our son's name is Loki. I'm not a big fan, but he loves it. I keep hoping it will grow on me. Norse god of mischief? You're just asking for a little Hellraiser at that point. Now I got that picture of the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy in my head, where Billy goes to Valhalla and Loki is this skinny guy pulling on an elastic band, and Odin goes, Loki, remember what happened last time, as he points to his eye. Yeah, all you normies will bring up Marvel or something, but frankly, I'm so totally goddamn done with Marvel. We named our daughter Isabel because it was a name on both of our lists that matched. We wanted a long name, something regal but could be shortened up. We talked about Elizabeth, Victoria, those sort of names. Decided on Isabel. My only regret is we did this as Twilight was dying down and everyone assumed her name was Isabella, even after I spelt it out over the phone for them several times, with an E on the end, Isabel. People would ask and still ask, do you call her Bella? That'd be so cute. No, shut the hell up. You know what? That would that'd be kind of infuriating. Not a parent, and sort of the opposite here. My brother and his then-fiancée were about to have a kid, and they argued about the name all the way to the delivery room. He wasn't around when they had to do the paperwork for the baby's name, and he was upset when she named their son Logan. I mentioned to him that it's not a terrible name. After all, it's Wolverine's name. About a week or so later, I hear him on the phone with a friend talking about how he didn't like the name until he realized that his kid is named after Wolverine. Logan. Strong, manly name. It's a name you gotta live up to, though. My wife and I have a daughter that we named Jordan. I'm fine with that. My wife is a very independent woman, and Jordan is kind of a strong name for a girl. Now we're thinking about having another kid, and if it's a boy, she wants to name him Michael. Jordan and Michael. Michael and Jordan. I'm 6'7", she's 6'3", and both very white. She somehow thinks it won't be weird if our most likely tall children are named after freaking Michael Jordan. I don't want to be answering questions or listening to jokes about their names for the next 20 years, though. I don't really get this dude's damage, to be honest. I mean, is that what people are going to think about when you hear them or call them? It's Michael Jordan. Yeah, people are going to think it, but it's whatever. Who gives a crap? I have a friend from high school who has 4 kids. Oldest is Landon, perfectly normal if very popular. Second is Caden, getting more odd, but still in the realm of normal. Third and only girl is Kensley. Now you're just making things up. And she's due any day with her 4th, Brogan. I really hope they are done since the names are getting progressively worse. My cousin also just had a baby, and I have no idea how to pronounce the name. Ellie, best guess is Ellie, but no one can confirm this. Okay, well, earlier I said that you can name your kids whatever you want and stuff, just don't make it erotica or anything like that. It's like the people earlier saying Jaden with a double N at the end and stuff like that. I don't get the point of naming your kids pretty regular stuff, but being it's going to be a regular name, but I'm going to add different letters to it so it just sounds the same. And it's what's the point? I guess this will get buried, but this thread seems to be filled with not answers to the question. So I named my oldest daughter Darian because my husband, then we were 17 and very stupid, wanted to call the baby Damien. And this was my compromise because I wasn't naming a child after the demon child in The Omen. Also, there was a female DJ on the radio at the time called Darian, so I thought it would work. Well, it turns out that Darian is most often a boy's name and very often a black name. My daughter is in her 20s now and she has never let me live it down. Everywhere she goes, people expect a black man. She's a nerdy, short, white chick. I swear I had good intentions. I was literally just thinking to myself as I read that Darian's more of a boy's name, isn't it? Used to work with a girl named Latrina. Latrine jokes constantly. Any name that has an easy joke to make is a bad idea. Poor kid is going to hear it 1,000 times. Oh boy, howdy, do I know that feeling. 50 years ago, the family a few doors down from me had a son. They called him Boyd. His surname is George. They are fundamentalist Christians. Bet they regretted that. So rather than Boy George, it's Boyd George? In Chile, we have an urban legend that in Valparaiso, one of our main port cities, there are many kids named Usnavi. Why, you ask? Well, being a port city, it is host to ships from worldwide navies from time to time, including the U.S. Navy. Legend says that any girl who gets pregnant after a night of party with a U.S. Navy sailor names her child with the name tag his theoretical father had, and that tag says U.S. Navy, hence the name Usnavi. If that is actually true, that's really interesting. I found a Verizon bill on the ground one time. Figured I would dispose of it in case it had any important information. Guy's name was Michael Michaels. Little bit silly, but definitely memorable. Not a parent myself, but I tried to warn my friend that everyone was going to be naming their kid Jacob because of the damn Twilight movie, and she was cursing her kid to years of sharing classes with other people of the same name. Her and I both have very common names for our age group, and she agreed that it was really annoying. And she also hates those Twilight movies, but she stuck to Jacob nonetheless. Sure enough, Jacob was the #1 most common name for the year her Jacob was born. Poor baby Jacob. Poor all baby Jacobs. Don't name your baby Jacob. I think this personal vendetta for the name Jacob goes beyond the Twilight movies. My mom was going to name me Tawny, as in Tawny Kitane, or better known as the chick from that Whitesnake video. It was the late 80s and my mom was 17. She didn't go through with it because when I was born, I didn't look like a Tawny. My brother was named after Samuel Adams. No, not one of the founding fathers of the United States, but after the beer. I don't think they regret it. I just think it's interesting to share. Yeah, I gotta admit, I'm not really feeling Tawny either.
My mom wanted to name me Stuffin'. What the hell is a stuffin'?
I don't know, bro. Maybe she just thought it was cute. My wife is fortunately somewhat more sensible than me and vetoed all of my wacky name choices, so I do not have a Shamalar, nor a River, Temperance, Winfred, or a Ford. I'm still a bit sore about Winfred and River, but I do concede that she had a point with the rest in hindsight. I was allowed more leeway with the middle names, and my eldest has the middle name Neris, as in Major Kira, which would be fine except that it's spelled exactly the same as a Welsh name, which is pronounced Neris, which is entirely not what I was going for. My son's middle name is Zed, so when anyone asks him what the Z in his name stands for, he can say Zed, which I thought at the time was really cool. Then sometime thereafter I came to the conclusion that it was stupid. Now I don't know what I think. He seems to like it though. Oh, and my daughter whose middle name is Storm is afraid of thunder and lightning. That last bit is pretty cute. Also, I don't know, I think some of the names this guy comes up with sound pretty cool. Not the namer, but the named. My rents named me Andrew, but it was recorded as Adnru. Apparently, my mother noticed soon after, but didn't actually care. She then lost my birth certificate, so I never knew. I found out when I got it replaced trying to get my license. I had to file court papers and everything to get it changed, and she thought the whole thing was hilarious. So no, my parents didn't regret anything. This has got me paranoid about my own birth certificate now. I'm an Andrea and I'm a guy. The half-Italian explains it. Didn't help growing up in West Virginia. Hey, that's a girl's name. Not in Italy, I explain over and over. I never had much of a nickname, but I'm pretty sure it's really stunted my life. People can't remember it or they say it wrong because they just don't believe it. It's definitely a big problem. Not as much as I live in New York City, but still doesn't help. What was she thinking? She's only third generation, too. She should know naming a boy a common girl's name in West Virginia was an awful idea. I know I keep alluding to my name and stuff, and this isn't about me, but I also suffered with people insulting me and telling me that I had a girl's name or likening my name to a girl's name. So yeah, this one kind of hits home for me. I know a guy whose name is Tony, but it is spelled Tony. That is so freaking dumb. No, that's the worst name. That's the worst name! For a smidgen of context for those of you who maybe don't understand, their name is spelled Toeknee. It's dumb. That's so dumb. My dad wanted to change my name when I was about 6 months old because everyone at work was giving him so much crap. My mom's name is Pat. My dad's name is Rick. My name is Patrick. People who have ever hired homeless people with the "will work for food" signs, what was your experience like? One super cold night over Christmas break a couple of years back, my roommates and I were walking to Taco Bell and saw a homeless man laying in the parking lot. He had a cheap, thin blanket, so we brought him some food and asked him if he wanted to spend the night inside, and he came back and stayed at our house. Via Facebook, we helped him find his daughter, who he hadn't spoke to in a couple of years. He was able to wish her a Merry Christmas. I spent the night worrying that he would steal everything in the house. When I woke up, the blankets were neatly folded, and he had left us 2 pairs of socks and some deodorant. A week later, we came home to find that someone had raked all of our leaves for us. Haven't seen him since, but I hope he is well. 10 out of 10. Would do again. Lovely story, dig the human kindness. I myself could not help someone to that degree, allowing them in my home, but that's because I have skepticism and doubts in people's human nature. In college, I got my fraternity to hire a homeless guy I always talked to do security for our parties. I went to college in a pretty crappy city, and my fraternity never turned people away from our parties, so we sometimes had to worry about gang members wandering in. I actually met a former Latin king who was pretty cool. The school wouldn't provide security since it could be seen as them condoning underage drinking, so I suggested we hire this homeless guy I knew who was always at my go-to Munchies gas station because he had actually helped me out when I almost got mugged once, and knew a lot of the less than savory characters. We told him we just needed him to let us know if there was anyone he knew might cause a problem. Dude was more professional than most bouncers at the bars I've been to. He made everyone that wasn't obviously a student show their neck and wrists for gang tattoos and ran a tight goddamn ship. Our president ended up getting him a bouncer job at a club downtown. That's a little more my speed. Give a man a fish, teach a man to fish, yada yada yada. I'm sure you all know the saying. I was homeless for 4 years, 15 to 19. One day I applied for a security guard job at the local hospital for a joke. Was punkish at the time. When I showed up, I almost scared the guy off, but he shook it off and asked me to stay for the interview. For the first half hour, he asked me questions one would ask any applicant. After he finished, he looked at me and asked me my story. We sat and talked for close to 2 hours. I got my stuff and was preparing to leave when he came up to me and told me, "Cut your hair, take off the piercings, and be here on Wednesday. You look like a guy that could use a chance in life." I went back to my hole that night and thought things through. It was August 16th, 2001, and I've been off the streets ever since. Sometimes all we need in life is a chance to prove ourselves. That last bit rings so true, but it's such a shame because I've seen a lot of people squander that opportunity in turn or short-term satisfaction. I once picked up a hitchhiker that was trying to get from Washington to New Mexico when I was camping in Yellowstone. He had family in New Mexico that offered to help him and had a good job lined up. He just had to get there. So we packed him up and took him back to Colorado with us. He stayed on our couch for a week or two and picked up our mess and took care of maintenance I grossly neglected. My roommates and I were in college at the time and partied 3 to 4 days a week, so you can imagine the mess. The little money he would get from doing odd jobs for neighbors and such, he would buy food and beer for all of us. One day I had an errand to run about 50 miles closer to his destination, but still 300 plus miles from where he needed to be. He came with me, and when he got out of the car, handed me a letter and said, "Don't read it until I get home," then walked through a field straight towards the Rocky Mountains. When I got home, we all read the letter, and it was the kindest set of words I'd ever received. About a month later, we get a call from an area code I don't recognize. It was him. He made it and called us on his first payday at his new gig. He also told us about the remainder of his journey. Turns out he walked and camped a large portion of the way back. I have since moved multiple times and grown up a bit. He's still welcome back whenever he wants, though. I hope all is well, Freddy. Maybe it's because I watched the first half of Batman Begins till 2 in the morning the other night, but something about that just sounds so cool. He turned away, walked through a field towards the Rocky Mountains. Cool AF. We've hired hundreds of them over the last 20 years, mainly because I'm lazy and I can make more money with my time doing what I do. The only really memorable one was Tavion. Tavion stopped me in our parking lot one Friday morning and said he needed some work and he was willing to do whatever we had. Just the day before, I'd gotten a notice from the city saying the bamboo on our back lot was getting out of hand and we needed to get rid of it. It's a little over an acre, and if you've ever seen how bamboo grows, there were thousands of 20-foot stalks. Told him I'd give him $100 to do it. Gave him a machete and figured I'd never see him or the machete again. Over the course of the day, he cut every damn piece of the bamboo down and had them laid in a couple of huge piles. Paid him his money, thanked him, and told him I'd get my guys to haul it to the dump Monday. He asked me if he could have the big pieces first, and I gladly let him. Came back in Monday morning, and he was back in the lot helping somebody load a monster-sized load of bamboo onto a trailer. He'd spent the weekend cutting all the branches off and trimming it into 6-foot-long sections and was selling them all for $350 to a local plant nursery he'd done day labor work for in the past. We talked about it for a few minutes after the truck left, and he just kept smiling and saying there was a hustle in everything, you just had to find it. That is some real good advice from Tavion. In Chile, my father and I parked in a sketchy neighborhood when we went to visit some family. Dad sees a homeless guy and gives him $5 and tells him to watch our car. Later, when we're walking back to our car, we see some guy trying to take our windshield wipers. My dad's about to yell something when our homeless guy comes running like a bum out of hell, punches the guy in the back of the head, and the guy runs off. Homeless dude chases after him, but my dad tells him to calm down. Dad gives him some extra cash and we have dinner with him. 10 out of 10 would hire again. Well, technically your father hired him. Also, there's something strange about the possessive language in saying, our homeless guy. I tried once, really just wanted my lawn mowed. Told the guy I'd cook him a meal if he mowed my lawn. All I got was an FU. He was literally holding a sign that said, we'll work for food. Maybe he really was just looking for money. Maybe because I was 19 at the time, he thought I was messing with him. I guess I'll never know. Unfortunate, but perhaps the man's been burnt too many times. Unsure if he was homeless, but a young man on a bike asked to paint the numbers on my curb for a donation. I was noticing that it was illegible just the other day, so made sense to have it done. He'd done my neighbor's house and it looked good enough, so I said yes. We chatted a bit. He said he'd been laid off and couldn't find work. I ended up giving him $10 for about 10 minutes of work. He did a really nice job. 2 cans of paint, a pack of number stencils, and his positive attitude was a good investment on his part. I well and truly hope things worked out for that guy. Sometimes when you fall on hard times, you might not have a glamorous backup plan or anything like that, but as long as you're making money, as long as you haven't given up and just decided to wallow in your failure, I'd say you still have a chance of picking yourself back up. My parents have a house in Florida they rent out. My dad was down there doing repairs to it when a homeless man on a bike stopped by and asked if my dad needed help. Dad decided to hire him. Alton, the homeless man, helped my dad repaint the house, mow the lawn, and cut out all the overgrown plants. When the house wasn't rented and my family was up north, my dad paid Alton to mow the yard and keep an eye on the place. While working with my dad, Alton asked my dad if he could borrow some money to buy some nice pants and shoes for an interview he had for a job. Dad wasn't sure he could trust him yet, so instead my dad took him out to a store and they went shopping together for these items. Alton got the job as a chef and eventually got himself a room in a house with some other guys. Occasionally, Alton will ask my dad for some emergency money and he always finds a way to pay it back. I find it interesting that my dad was so open to work with Alton due to him being both black and poor, those being 2 types of people my dad can say judgmental things about. Either way, I'm glad it all worked out for Alton. Words and the things people say can certainly give us a good insight into the thoughts and feelings of those around us, but at the end of the day, when an opportunity arises, it is the actions people take that they should be truly judged on. My family gave a man a job around our farm who was homeless. He stayed at a house on our property and worked on various jobs. He was a great guy and just made some mistakes by getting involved in illegal substances. He was a great worker and did a lot of good work. Eventually, sadly, his wife came back into his life and got him back on the junk. He pawned some of our equipment off and left. Either way, they can be great workers, but sometimes there are deeper problems that are reasons they are homeless in the first place. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for a betrayal, and this is a pretty damn bad betrayal. Pretty late to this, but hey, I feel good for what I did. I was a shift leader at a Hardee's, Carl's Jr. for you West Coast people, and it was perfectly located near where the homeless and all the skate kids hung out at. Both groups used to come in and harass everyone before I became a shift leader. Once I got to that point, instead of yelling and kicking them out, I decided to sit them down and ask what's going on. Come to find out, many of those teenagers and kids were either living in abusive homes or even homeless. I got the idea to keep the food people mess up and even using my manager meal to feed these poor kids while I could. I became real close with many of them, and to this day keep up on all of them. One in particular used to be in and out of jail a lot. I promise him every time he comes out, I'll buy his first real food. Well, after a while, I moved jobs and got him a job where I worked at. A few months later, helping him out with what I could, he got a place. His girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time, moved in, and they are doing great, and their baby is adorable. Being able to help and understand so many of those kids now really changed my view on so many kids and why they act the way they do. I really have nothing else to say except good job. A lot of these stories have been a lot more positive than I was expecting, and I have very little to say after a certain point. A homeless guy came by my house when I wasn't home and asked my roommate if he could pick up the sticks in the yard. My roommate gave him some money and the guy left without doing anything. A few weeks later, the guy came by when I was home, but my roommate was out. He started telling me I owed him money for cleaning up my yard. I had never seen him before, so I told him to get the hell off my property before I busted his head open. He left and then came back, broke into my house a few days later and stole a guitar I'd had since I was a kid. Heartwarming? No. Well, great googly moogly, is the latter half of the video going to be about how people shouldn't be too naive? I hired a homeless guy years ago when I was a construction superintendent building condos. Frank. He was a super hard worker, always showed up on time, usually before me, waiting at the job site. Frank was a former high school football star and was ridiculously strong, so anything that required brute force was Frank's domain. He also already had a lot of construction experience, so he didn't need to be supervised very much. I got to like Frank a lot. Everyone did. He was a very emotional and passionate guy. He had no problem crying, even at an inappropriate time. But that's what we loved about him. He was just very genuine. But like many homeless people, sadly, he had a drinking problem, and I suspect some illegal substance problems as well. I never knew for sure. I knew he was a drunk, though. I also didn't really care because, like I said, he showed up for work on time and he kicked butt at it. Anyway, since I was young and naive at the time, I took a big chance on Frank. I bought him an old pickup truck for $2,500. He had recently roomed up with this Jamaican guy who seemed okay and had a place to stay. So I figured if I gave him a truck, it might be enough to push-start him into a stable life. He had no driver's license, so I told him we would work to get that taken care of, but only Jamaica could drive for now. He called his Jamaican roommate Jamaica. Well, a week later, he gets arrested for driving without a license and the car gets impounded. I was furious. I cussed him out. He cried. I paid to get the truck out of the impound lot and gave it to another friend who needed a car, and he basically did the same crap. Didn't get his license, didn't take care of legal issues he had, so let the truck just sit at his house for 6 months. I eventually just sold the truck on Craigslist. Interestingly, I ran into Frank a few years ago, and he told me he was taking classes in community college and has a place to stay, so I was happy to hear that. But the lesson is, don't be naive. I hope Frank's doing okay, but you can get burned by being too nice. Some people just aren't ready to fix their own lives, and you can't force it. Yep, that last little bit, literally the most important part. I know it seems like I'm being a pessimistic little B-word, but remember that. No joke, I hired a guy to help clean our house barn. He showed up every day and worked his butt off for months. I noticed this guy had old beaten up glasses and looked like they were 4 inches thick, and when he took them off, he was absurdly blind. I asked him when he had last seen an eye doctor, and it had been over 2 decades. I told him if he continued to save his money for a future studio apartment, I would buy him new glasses. The day finally came when he had saved $1,000, and I honored my word and bought him some new glasses, and it came out to about $400, and he literally started crying when he first put them on because he could see so much better. A few months after that, money started disappearing from the office. This barn was easy to break into if you were skinny because you could slide in under the metal gate just barely enough to get inside. After working with the police, we set up a floor mat that automatically calls the police when it's stepped on. That night, I showed up to the barn with all the police lights illuminating it. Inside the barn, unable to sneak back out of the crack under the metal gateway, was Leroy. When he was arrested, he was drunk and in possession of a pipe for smoking illegal substances. I saw him a few more times on the street, and it broke my heart. These are already getting quite depressing, but it does vary things up a little bit. I mentioned it earlier, but sometimes people give up long-term, real opportunities for work or even friendship in exchange for their baser, more quick relief habits. And if you ever find yourself in that situation, you've got to be able to make the decision on what is better for you and stick with it, as hard as it might be. Once when I was a kid, my dad and I were parking on a moderately sketchy Manhattan street around 8 at night to go to a restaurant. At the time, my dad drove a Lincoln Navigator, and when he parked it, this homeless guy immediately started chatting him up the second we took a step onto the sidewalk. I remember him telling my dad that he'd watch his car for $20 and make sure nobody messed with it while we were eating. My dad gave him the $20, and while we were eating, I asked him why, and he told me because if I didn't give him the $20, he would have slashed my tires himself. When we got out, the dude was still standing there by the car, and well, it was fine. You know what, if that was his true intention, smart homeless man and even smarter father for knowing that that's probably his true intention. I was in my front yard and a man came up to me and asked if I had any work. He said he needed $9 so he could catch a bus to Tennessee to go live with his sister. He said he hadn't eaten in 3 days. He had caught his wife cheating and she threw him out on the streets. I had a couple small odd jobs and he did them. I gave him a bag of food, $20 and a story. Many years ago, after a train trip from Ohio to New York City, I realized I didn't have enough money to get home, to Connecticut. I was jokingly telling the couple that I had been sitting with on the train my woes. The man pulls out his wallet and hands me a $20 bill to tell me to pay it forward someday. The homeless man was in tears, gave me a hug, thanked me, and promised me he would. I hope he is okay. Well, at the end of the day, that's the best you can hope for, that in doing a good deed for someone, they'll keep that good deed in their heart and mind, remember it forever, and hopefully treat people as kindly as you treated them, or, at least maybe change their ways if maybe they weren't as good a person when you met them. This doesn't directly answer the question, but I thought I'd contribute. It's not really much about how good or bad the homeless guy was, but more about how he affected me. I'm not a very good storyteller, but if you want to read on, please do. I was never truly homeless, but I sort of put myself in a situation a few years back. But this is not a story about me, it's a story about my dear friend. We'll call him Sean. I have an advanced education and at the time had decent prospects of a job. I wanted to start my own business, so on a very big opportunity, I started a business, got a warehouse, office equipment, and all that. The promising line fell through, so I went to business plan B. Anyways, my ex is equally educated and stuff, but she didn't want to work to support me while I got my business taking off. Some other personal issues as well, but that is the gist of it. Anyways, we separated, and with a little bit of savings, I ended up living in the warehouse. I did get divorced eventually, since I was on plan B instead of money rolling in. I had to fight tooth and nail to make sales one by one. The business eventually grew and it wasn't doing that bad, but in the beginning it was a dark period of my life for many reasons. Divorce and being very poor was one thing, but one of my parents was diagnosed with an illness just before the split as well. Because of my immigration status, I couldn't really go to see her and I hadn't seen her in a few years. I used to think of some dark things every day for a long time, but a few things kept me going. Grit, determination, and I told myself I had to survive to go and see my parents again. But another thing was my friend Sean, my land manager, a really nice guy that put up with me living in an industrial neighborhood, hires guys in bad situations to help around here and there, ex-cons, homeless guys, etc. To be honest, from what I can tell, a bunch of them were pieces of crap, but not Sean. He lived in a warehouse on the other side of the street. I was in a bad shell where the only time I'd go out and meet other people was to get drunk. Sean helped me get out of this rut. Sean was much older than me, in his late 50s. I was in my mid-20s. He was a straight-up alcoholic. Sean moaned, was relatively sour, and kinda did bare minimum at work, but boy, did he know how to fix things. I hired him to do some work around my shop. Even though I didn't really have much money, he always did a good job. He would come over unannounced or knock on my door when I was still sleeping at like 2 p.m. It was exactly sort of the intervention and interaction I needed. He'd tell me about his divorce and about how he was heartbroken, but how time passes and heals most wounds. He'd also tell me about his folks passing. When I was talking about my parent, he sucked at cooking and made really unhealthy stuff, but he'd always bring over food if he made some. Eventually, it got to the point where whenever I felt extremely bad, I'd go over and have a beer or two. Shoot the breeze, listen to his stories of his wild youth, look at some cool memorabilia he collected, pictures of old muscle cars, drag cars he worked on, etc. When it came to working on cars and motorcycles, I had a couple of clunkers. He'd just help me for free. I tried to help back by helping him keep down his alcohol intake and listen to him vent when he wasn't drinking. Of course, gave him jobs whenever I needed it and could afford to hire someone. Anyways, we came from extremely different backgrounds, especially since I was largely a kid who grew up in a good family who was pushed to get all the education I can get. Him, on the other hand, had just recently been homeless and living as a bum. In some strange ways, he became my best friend for that year. I grew the business but pulled myself out of the situation. It was no longer worth my time to hang on to this past dream and left for a job interview on a project that I'd get paid handsomely. On the way back, I called him back to check up on him and he told me he was just moaning about his pains again. The years had been very hard on his body and he didn't really take care of himself, so he was always complaining about one thing or another. I just made sure someone in the area knew about it and was checking in on him and didn't think much of that. Anyways, that was the last time I ever spoke to him. He passed away while I was making a cross-country drive back to the city. My good friend Sean came in and out of my life just as he had lived his life. I still kept this Christmas card he wrote me one year. It reminds me to be thankful, for he was there during the lowest points of my life. And to everyone else, you never know who will come in and out of your life to help you move on. That is absolutely the best and my favorite story on this topic. They cultivated a relationship, acknowledged each other's flaws, became friends, they trusted each other, had each other's back, talked about their issues and whatnot, and it's super tragic that his friend died, but at the end of the day, this dude, Sean, obviously left a really lasting, positive impression on him that gave him hope, and you know what? If you've got no hope for yourself, well, God, why not try and cultivate hope for other people? Teens, what is something important that you feel your parents should learn? Do not insist on comparing me to my friends. They do not act the same way in front of you as they might in their own home, and you have no clue how they act when they're at home with their own parents. Done off pretty strong, yeah. I may have heard that once or twice in my teen years. Just because one of my friends is a girl doesn't mean you have to constantly bring her up. What's the story behind that? Do they give you the whole,
Oh, why don't you take your friend Stephanie to prom? Stephanie's a nice girl.
Privacy. My grandmother will come into my room while I'm sleeping just to look through my window above my head to see what the neighbors are doing. She looks above my head to peep at what I'm doing on my phone. She gets mad at me when I don't tell her an answer to a personal question she asks me. She is also untrustworthy and will lie to make a story more interesting, so I can't tell her anything in fear she will spread a rumor that isn't true about me. I once told her how the gym teacher passed away from cancer, and she proceeded to call her friend and tell her my gym teacher dropped dead in front of us at the gym and cancer spilled out of her. If cancer could spill out of you, I wonder what it would look like. I bet everyone's like, I'd probably be like a black tarry substance and really smelly and stuff, but I'm picturing like the Nickelodeon slime. Get my attention before talking to me. They did get mad at me when I miss the first half of what they are saying, but it's because I'm already doing something. I don't mind pausing my game, putting down my book/phone, muting the TV, etc. Just say my name, or even, hey, you, before you start talking so I realize I'm supposed to engage. I think that just sounds like a lack of awareness of your surroundings. Like, I like to know who is in the room with me, what's going on, stuff like that at all times. So it's like, are they on the phone? No. Is there anyone else in the room with me? No. So they're obviously talking to me. It's only annoying when they then turn around and go, oh, I'm just talking to myself. You don't have to listen. I understand that compared to you, I shouldn't have any stress, but teen stress does exist. Maybe in the future I'll learn how naive I was and how small my stresses now are, but right now, what I'm stressed about matters to me. That's super valid, but I will say, yeah, being an adult kinda sucks. Enjoy being a teenager while you can. Don't stop me from hanging out with my friends and then later complain why am I always in my room and not outside enjoying life. That's just unfair. That does sound pretty dumb, but I don't know, it maybe depends on the kind of people that you're hanging out with. Doesn't mean you can't go out and enjoy life, it just means they don't want you to be hanging out with dodgy people. Like I said though, I don't know what the situation is behind this, I'm just trying to rationalize it to some degree. Communication through technology is still communication. I know it's not true for all people my parents' age, but a lot seem to be stuck on the idea that just because you're texting someone or messaging them online, it's somehow not real contact and not a real relationship with the other person. Does someone have an online girlfriend? That's the way they make it sound at the end, especially. While yes, you do pay for my tuition, car, clothing, food, etc., you need to give me some sense of control. Rules are important, I understand, but I need to learn how to function on my own. If you couldn't tell from my brother developing alcoholism the second he got to college, if you control your kids too hard in high school and then let them out into college, they don't know what to do with the freedom and go frickin' nuts. That is some solid parenting advice. That is so true. Don't snoop through my things. If I have a personal note to or from a friend or a piece of writing, don't look through it and read it, and don't send a picture of it to everyone else in the family. It's out of sight for a reason. People might disagree with me, but I kind of think that parents can snoop through their kids' stuff all they want. If they have a habit of doing it, just get better at hiding your stuff. Don't make fun of our relationships. Whenever they see me talking to a girl, they always ask, "Who's your new girlfriend?" They always ask me after school, "How's your girlfriend doing?" Even when they know I'm not in a relationship, or even right after I break up. I know they're not doing it to be mean, but it's little stuff like this that makes me hesitant to share my actual relationships with them. Just remember that this is sort of an awkward time for us, and relationships are no exception. I always try to take it in jest because I know they're kidding, but other people might take it as an insult. Or you pushing them to find a girlfriend/boyfriend when they are not ready. Also, just because I've been stressed or mopey doesn't mean I'm gay. It just means I don't feel like talking. I've had to explain twice to my parents that I am not a closeted homosexual. Just sounds like pretty basic parental banter to me, but if it's something that this guy's stressed out about, then yeah, fair enough. We're so dramatic because a lot of things are new. We can feel new levels of emotion. It might seem silly to cry over someone we've dated for less than a year, but this is literally the most heartbroken we've ever been. Our schoolwork is the hardest we have ever done. Our responsibilities are the most daunting. From our perspective, what seems trivial to you is new and terrifying and the most extreme it has ever been. I think I've been gauging this more on like the general situation in that like how relatable is this? I understand this is more of a personal thing, but I'm going to say this, parents are dealing with not as many for sure, but also new stressful situations, and it's not about being an adult or a teenager or something like that, because I've said it before. Adults don't have all the answers, and on the heartbreak thing, think about it like this. Yeah, your heart's broken, you like this girl a lot, but at least this girl isn't divorcing you, she's taking your money, your house, and your dog. She didn't even want the dog when you got the dog, but she certainly wants it now. My advice to anyone when they're in a dire state of mind or something is think about the situation, think about how much worse it could be and where you are as opposed to the worst it could be, and then just get on with your life, because guess what? All of these situations are bigger in your mind than they are in real life. Of course, then there are problems like paying the mortgage on time. That's a big problem. Our problems are real. My mom is really good at understanding this. She gets angry along with me when I mention how my best friend got hit by her boyfriend. She gives me advice when I say that my friends have depression. She gets worried when I'm quiet and easily angered. Not only does she empathize, she helps. She once dialed 911 for a friend who had attempted self-deletion while I told her how to apply first aid. She gave me permission to deck the abusive boyfriend. She lent me her old psychology textbook so that I could better help my friend with depression. She makes me feel comfortable enough to talk about whatever is bothering me. Most people on this thread give very good examples of what not to do. Let my mother be the model for what to do. I mean it every time I say that she is the best mom ever. Okay, now let's talk about my dad. He is every bit as awesome as my mom, just in different ways. He grew up as the oldest son in a ghetto in San Antonio. He was the first in my family to go to college. He's worked for the Air Force, has been a pastor, been a missionary, and is now a higher up at an energy savings firm. Because of him, I've always lived a comfortable life, but it does not stop there. He teaches me everything he knows. I remember him explaining his Excel spreadsheet in 5th grade. In middle school, he started giving me a large monthly allowance and told me to pay for basically everything but rent in order to teach me money management. I'll be honest, I talk more to my mom about emotional problems. She got her degree in psychology after all, but I can talk to my dad about literally anything else. Personal finances, politics, theology, current events, books, movies, anything that pops into my head, I can talk to my dad about. He taught me that even if you can't do masculine things like repair a car or assemble furniture, you can still be one of the greatest men out there. I've learned so much from him, and I learned more every day. I told him about this post and asked him if he had anything he wanted to share with the internet. He said, "When your mother and I first had your older brother, we decided that we would have 2 goals in parenting. That you would know that we love you unconditionally, and that you would know we are always there for you. Everything else we do flows out of those 2 goals." Yeah, he actually talks like that. It's awesome. If there are any parents or teens reading this, strive to be like my parents. I wouldn't trade them for anything. Sounds like you got a strong nuclear family right there. You got a mother and a father who are both experienced in their own personal areas of expertise that they use to then build you up into a more rounded person and tell you that they love you all the time. Brag much? Nah, this is good. This was a nice game changer. Yeah, that's how a family should be. You can't pause an online game! Oh, I feel the Lord in the house tonight. Testify, brother, testify! I hope you all appreciate the extra oomph I put into that one. So many arguments about that stuff. Don't assume that teen life today is the same as teen life when you were in high school. If your teen doesn't have a history of stereotypical bad teen behavior, don't treat them like they do. Yeah, I agree with that. For one thing, I think a lot of modern kids probably have anxiety because their simplest mistakes or even their biggest mistakes can be immortalized on a phone then uploaded to the internet within a few minutes. On the latter part, I don't know. I see a lot of scummy behavior from kids that I very much doubt they exhibit in front of their parents. Naturally, that's a case-by-case basis, but there are definitely some kids in the world that are unbelievably entitled. If your child doesn't agree with your religious views, back off and let them think it through. Pushing harder isn't helping and will just make them less likely to return to your faith in the future. I hid my true faith from my parents and went along with their faith for years. My sister decided to come out about her views, and that's how I know I made the right choice. Yeah, just generally don't try and force your opinions on kids in general or anything because, they might turn around and decide that they hate you and all of your ideas. Currently 17 and I'm really into technology. I got a job at 15 because I wanted to build a computer and still hold it today. Anyway, the things I buy are mine. I did work for them, and yet they still threaten to take them away from me if I act irritable. Being irritable is caused by depression, anxiety, and other crap going on. The constant fighting with my sister, that gets on my nerves. Yes, she's screaming, but screaming back will not make her stop. Please, for the love of God, don't downplay my issues. Yes, my girlfriend cheated. Yes, I'm a teenager, and maybe it's not that big of an issue, but Christ, don't act like it doesn't affect me and how I act. I have to say, contrary to what I may say in any of these, I always take these stories with a slight pinch of salt. If anything, I wish I could hear the other sides of these things, because in this occasion, I wonder, although this kid seems like they're an okay kid, job at 15 and everything like that, clearly has a sense of responsibility and whatnot, that's great. But the real question is here, are you being irritable or are you being insufferable? Just because I don't go out every day does not mean I have no friends. I talk to the same people online every day and see them in class 5 days a week. My parents think I'm antisocial and would get some friends if I go outside. In reality, I am more social when you let me stay in my room. Yeah, I don't really see a problem with that. If you're just staying in all the time whenever you can, that's kind of bad for you. Catch some rays, the sun's great for you. Not in excess, of course. Nothing's good for you in excess. I know that I'm smart and I receive good grades. They just need to learn that I will never be the valedictorian or an honor roll kid or anyone they deem intelligent. I'm a little confused. Do your parents genuinely think you're stupid, or do they simply think you are not living up to the potential that you have? Stop comparing us to your high school selves. Yes, Mom, I know you're a class president, prom queen, valedictorian, and captain of the cheer team, but I'm not you, so stop being disappointed and be proud of what my person can achieve. Well, this is just annoying because now I want to know what you can/have achieved. Asking your child to tell the truth about something, and then when they do, being mad at them about it. I would much rather prefer if when I told you the truth, you would thank me for being honest and lightening the punishment, if any. This isn't just for teenagers, though. My younger sister, who is 4, gets into trouble sometimes, and when my mother asks her about it and she tells the truth, she gets very mad at her. So now whenever she asks her to tell the truth, she just lies about it. Makes me sad. Well, that makes me sad too, because you know what? When you're telling a child to tell the truth, you need to be a little more gentle about it. Yeah, they told the truth, they were brave. You don't have to reward them or anything. You just have to be cool about it. You can tell them you're disappointed. You can tell them you're upset. You just gotta be cool. I do not have a goddamn time turner. I cannot clean my room, take a shower, do all my homework, feed the cat, clean the litter box, and put together my Halloween costume in 1 hour. I hang out with older people. I'm 15. I mostly hang out with 18 to 20-year-olds I meet through activism/environmentalism, volunteer leadership stuff because the conversations are more intellectually stimulating. There's no dumb drama. They're inspiring people that I look up to a lot. Networking is easier and I've opened up amazing opportunities for myself, and frankly, I just enjoy being with them more than anybody else my age. No, we don't go off and drink booze. No, they're not peer pressuring me into having sex. No, we're not doing illegal substances. They're just nicer people. I know you think 15 is way too young to be doing traveling programs and internships, but I have plans and goals in mind for the future, and as much as I'd like to be your little girl forever, you need to let me grow up and start exploring my options. I don't understand why you can't just be happy that I'm eager about post-sex stuff already like any other parent would. Volunteering and doing environmental work isn't a waste of time. I'm networking in areas that might be useful in the future. I'm making friends that I actually like. I'm building essential skills like public speaking and fundraising. I'm making a name for myself. I'm enjoying myself and I'm giving back to the community. Please stop threatening to take away my volunteer work as punishment. Sounds like they're pretty happy doing what they're doing, so I don't understand why they don't just let them. Just, make sure that you remain to be a solid part of their life, give them support and love and stuff like that, and make sure that none of their 20-plus-year-old friends are just waiting for them to turn 18. It might be legal, but I'd still say it's grounds for grooming. Probably too late, but this one bugs the hell out of me. It isn't the 70s and 80s anymore. Yes, we understand that you didn't use your TVs barely at all. You rode your bikes and played basketball, etc., etc. And yes, we understand it's good for us to be active, but we live in a different generation. The generation before them married young, didn't have all the extra time due to technological advances that makes life easier and so on. Things change, and yet parents still parent like they wish they had been 30 years ago. I love my parents to death, but that's my biggest pet peeve with them. That's a conversation I have fairly frequently. I mean, it's weird to think that a couple hundred years ago, you'd have until maybe you were 30 or something like that, and that would be considered a full life, maybe for good reason. Lord knows it sucks to get so old that you literally cannot do anything for yourself. But I think as a result, with modern technology, medicine, and all that stuff, we have a generation of people that just kind of stay as teenagers for a lot longer than they probably should. That ain't me judging or anything like that, but, always keep in mind that you should really get your life on track. Learn to use a computer. Oh god, I super get this one. I think my mother only learned how to use a computer, she uses a tablet really, about 5 or so years ago. What's really annoying is that she still doesn't know how to copy and paste. Because I said so is a crappy reason. Depends on what they're asking you to do. It's not weird for a Hispanic truck driver to deliver to the Hong Kong market. Ah, yes, the immortal rivalry of the Chinese and the Mexicans. Your favoritism towards my sister devastates me. I mean, how can they help it? She's so much cooler than you. I kid. Favoritism, at least really, really blatant favoritism that results in, neglect is really awful.
Parents commenting on how I spend my money. I only spend about 20% of what I make on things I frickin' want that I now have to hide. This is how my closet under my bed is now full of Magic the Gathering cards. If they only knew how much I spent.
I don't know, card games are kind of a money sink. I mean, you get into them and then you gotta keep up with expansions that introduce new mechanics into the game because then your old decks are kind of obsolete based around the new hotness of the game. I play Digimon, the card game, sometimes, I haven't bought any for ages because I just look at how many I have and go, ugh, and then I've missed expansions and I don't really want to get into new expansions. It's a whole thing. Don't get into card games unless you are acutely aware that you are probably going to spend a lot of money if you're really getting into them. You shouldn't try to tell your kids what choices to make for things like college or uni. Sure, you can help them, but don't try to tell them to do something that they don't want to do. Well then please, just don't choose a topic that's utterly useless in the real world and won't make you any money and then complain and moan that everyone else should pay for your education. That might sound critical of me, but with the power of the internet, you can honestly learn all of these things that you could at university for free. Which is why my position on college and university learning personally is that you should take a few years off, do things, live your life, figure out what you actually want to do and what you enjoy doing, and then go to university with the knowledge of what you want to do and that you love doing is worth pursuing and paying for. But hey, I'm just a disappointed voice on the internet that as of yet hasn't gone to university, so what does my opinion matter? Do not tell your children if they were gay you would not go to the wedding. It's like saying that if I don't fit your mold, I'm not worthy of your love. It's also setting yourself up for years of distrust. I want to be open and I want them to be a part of my life so badly, but if they knew anything, even suspected anything, they wouldn't want to be a part of mine. The job of a parent is to guide, discipline, and love unconditionally. You can't change how your kid came out, but you can still love them. My parents should learn that if I could be different, I would be. If I could change myself, I could be their definition of normal. I would be. My parents should learn that my wildest dream is for them to love me for exactly who I am, just as much as I love them. I totally agree with the general message here, gay teens getting kicked out of homes, it's real freaking hard on them, being left out in the elements and no one to love them and stuff, and usually falling into bad habits or with people that take advantage of their emotional state, but I do believe that there are limits to unconditional love. For example, killing someone in cold blood, being a kitty fiddler. Just 2 examples of things that I would personally disown anyone for. But just being not exactly set to the mold that people expect of you, it's complete bullcrap when people disown you for that. Stop thinking you know everything. I can't get over this. Whenever my mom and I are doing something that involves modern technology, she just takes over like she knows everything and messes it up. I know what to do and try to tell her calmly, but she doesn't listen and sends everything to hell. 2. Whatever people say or write is not me. Whenever my mom goes through my things, she sees what other people have wrote and accuses me of writing them. She then tells me to tell her the truth truth, which I do, and I will still get accused of lying. Privacy is real. You were a teenager and I am a teenager. I go through a lot and the least I can get is some privacy. I can go on Google and search for something and she'll come into my room and start reading what I'm typing out loud or stand behind me watching what I'm doing. She'll also go through my phone, which is annoying. I just log out of my stuff now. 4. Stop calling me every 5 minutes. School is long, hard, and tiring and I get frustrated. I go home and try to relax before chores. Mom comes home and starts calling me 24/7 over little things. One day I actually just stood leaning on the wall waiting for her to call me, so I didn't get comfortable. 5. Let me go places without you. I can't even go to a school football game without my mom saying I'm not going by myself. Then she complains why I'm always indoors. My mom also makes me do other irritating stuff which I don't follow anyway, like reading 2 to 4 chapters of the Bible before going on the iPhone, iPad, computer, TV, or playing games, GTA 5, Mortal Kombat X, etc. Limits on all devices.
Well, I say, son, they don't sound like wholesome Christian games. I say, you gotta play yourself some Yakuza.
Oh man, that just hit me. Mortal Kombat X was the last Mortal Kombat game I bought. Is it that old now? It's almost 10 years old, goddamn. I would say to them the American dream idea is dead at this point in time. You could work hard and go to the right schools and have it still not pan out later in life. Half of the kids graduating higher education levels are having trouble finding jobs. So get off this idea that hard work leads to success, because it just is not true at this point in time. I see where this person is coming from a sense that I see a lot of things nowadays where, depending on what your sense of success is, whether it be followers or money or whatever like that, people do stupid, inconsequential stuff, and for some reason it brings them success. But guess what? Things might not work out the way that you wanted them to if you applied loads of hard work in school or on a topic or cultivating knowledge that you wanted because you thought, yeah, this will make me successful. But you know what? Life doesn't work like that. You now have the knowledge to do something, and you need to keep on striving and looking for the opportunities that you can get to apply that knowledge and those skills that you have cultivated yourself. It might take time before you can actually apply those things in a way that you deem makes you successful or content with life or whatever, but please, for the love of God, don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on working hard and working towards your dreams. Forensic scientists, what is the most WTF case that you ever had? A friend of mine is a CSI, and I don't know if he's posted here, but just in case he hasn't, I'll put this here. Anchorage, Alaska, 2008. A 27-year-old woman hasn't paid her rent in 4 months. The landlord gave her a bit of a reprieve because he knew she was very poor and she was in a low-income housing. But after 4 months of zero contact, enough is enough, and he calls the cops to get into her place and either see her to talk or change the locks and remove her stuff to a storage shed so the apartment can be released to someone else. The cops find the front door to be bolted and use the landlord's key to get in, then find the woman dead in her shower, just sort of slumped as if she fell against the wall and slid down. The water wasn't on, and as this is Alaska and in the winter, the water is never shut off by the city because if hot water isn't moving through the pipes, they freeze and burst. The fact that her shower is off means she never turned it on or someone turned it off. The body is taken to the morgue and autopsied at the family's request because no obvious means of death can be found. As far as the examination could conclude, she died from an adrenal surge causing her heart to stop, more commonly known as frightened to death, which yes, can actually happen in some rare cases. The body was old, but no test showed any residual illegal substances in her system. None were found in the apartment, nor was there any sign of anyone having entered or left before the cops. The young, pretty average health woman appears to have gotten into her shower, and then her heart stopped due to terror. As far as I know, that's where the story ends. No substantial evidence. When I was pretty young, I got into all of the procedural crime shows and stuff like CSI, Law and Order, just all those things, so I'm kind of interested in this topic. A friend of mine is a forensic scientist and her department dealt with burglary cases only, usually generating pretty uninteresting stuff to tell people. But her only good story is that once she got a pair of gloves found at a crime scene. She went to examine them and felt that there was something hard inside. She turned the gloves up to get it out and out falls a thumb, ripped off at the first joint. Apparently this particular burglar was holding up a safe while his mate went underneath it, dropped the safe on his hand, ripped his hand out and ran. They obviously caught the guy. The only interesting story they have, kind of rude, but I wonder if whoever caught them was like, so, was it worth it? A friend is a psychologist whose previous life was in crime scene photography. She went to the scene of a self-deletion in a garage. This guy had a project car that he worked on his whole life. When he decided to end it all, he wanted to go with the car. So he shut the garage and turned on the engine and waited. To top it off, he had taken a bunch of pain and sleeping pills. When my friend got there, it was a good while after his death. EMTs and other specialists were there looking for details and whatnot. He was the VP of a fairly large chain of local businesses, so there was an insurance settlement to consider. My friend is in the middle of photographing the scene and the guy was laying there, pronounced dead hours ago, and he suddenly just shook hard. She thought it was a death rattle, so she kept taking pictures. Eventually, the guy sat up and nodded, and the EMTs were called back in to stabilize him and eventually save him. Apparently, the car had run out of gas right at the moment he went out, and he was pronounced dead on the scene. He couldn't talk or do much, but he had actually survived.
I don't know what the laws are in Alaska. I was going to say he was lucky, but then I thought about the fact that he's probably being arrested for attempting self-deletion.
Forensic chemist here who occasionally gets called out to crime scenes just to consult on evidence collection. On the first one I ever went on, a father had killed his adult son and put the body in a deep freeze that was in his bedroom. There were a ton of cops and the other people from our lab there, but when the coroner asked for help removing the body from the freezer, I volunteered quickly, as I had never been that close to a dead body, other than funerals, and was curious. As I helped the coroner lift the body out of the freezer, which still had a bunch of food in it too, a pack of frozen biscuits was stuck to his body. I had to pry them off of him, which was both very weird and kind of funny at the same time. I often ponder, like so many other people do, what my final moments will define me as in the face of those who know and love me, as well as strangers who may be there to witness my downfall or whatever. And you know, there are people who obviously you know and care about, who love you, but that will remember you fondly, and then there are people like this who are just like, oh yeah, that guy who got biscuits stuck to him. Tragic story though. EMT here. We had a guy who was naked, bloodied, and tortured, then left outside in -10-degree weather until he froze. We found him literally frozen maybe a day after the fact. Now, my question is, how the hell do you move a 230-pound popsicle without breaking it? Very, very carefully, I imagine? I interned at the office of the chief medical examiner when I was 18, saw a lot of interesting stuff, learned a lot of interesting things. One case stuck with me more than the rest. I arrived one morning, went down to the basement where bodies were laid out for rounds every morning. On tables lay the usual, a couple of folks who died in the hospital and needed a partial autopsy to sign off on a death certificate, an illegal substance overdose, an illegal substance murder. Then on one table, there was a blue Tupperware bin, a big one, about 3 by 3 by 2. It was filled with concrete, and out of the edges a little plastic wrap was lining between the concrete and the bin, and then out of the top of the concrete a couple of toes were poking out. The story was, out in the country, a family saw a small fire in the woods outside of their house. They called the fire department, and after putting out the flames they found this bin. When we cracked the bin open, we found half of a man, about from the belly button down. Someone had thought the best way to dispose of this body would be to cut it in half, wrap it in plastic, put it in a Tupperware bin, fill the bin with concrete, and set it on fire. What they had really done was essentially cook the body in an oven with the plastic wrap acting as a roasting bag. Skin was sloughing off of the legs and feet, and the skin was discolored by this time, a nice green. Though this was about 10 years ago, I still distinctly remember being able to make out saw marks on the top edge of this half, however. Notes were taken and no signs of death were found on the legs and no indication of the person's identity either. Unfortunately, my internship ended a few weeks before they found the top half, so I never got to learn more about the case, but the image still certainly sticks with me till now. I once considered doing an internship at a morgue myself, but you know what? Some of the things you'd see in there would probably just, like they said, stick with you for the rest of your life, or at least a really long time. I'm not a forensic scientist, but did forensic anthropology as part of my degree. When handling a rib cage, a ton of flakes came off and ended up lodged in my mouth, nose, and eyes thanks to a friend. Yummy, flaky rib cage bits. Forensic genetic in Mexico. I've seen some serious stuff. I was assigned to the identification of mass graves, over 300 bodies, dismembered, scattered, and burnt. It was just one site. We had many. I'm gonna presume that's the work of the cartels. Stepfather used to be a police officer and loves telling stories about crime scenes. He went on to tell us about how after a motorcycle rider was struck by a train, he went under the wheel. His torso was found about 30 feet from his legs. They were connected by an intestine, so he picked up one end of the intestine and started to wrap it up like a rope. I defer back to the young man who had frozen biscuits stuck to his dead body. Just imagine that. You're dead on the floor and some guy's just wrapping up your intestines like he's putting away the garden hose. It's a rather surreal thought. My cousin is a coroner and the worst was he came to get a body in a trailer during the summer. Man had been dead at least a week and it had burst. He said the smell was the worst of his life. He and the other guys were up to their ankles in fluids and had to throw out his clothes and shoes. His boss felt so bad that he bought them each a new pair of like $300 shoes. I was literally watching Seven last night. It's a film with young Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. Do not recommend it for the faint of heart. And that's what I'm picturing. Like the crime scenes in it are super gritty and horrible. Like you would not want to be there. And that's what I'm imagining this trailer as. Not me, but there was a great case that I can't currently find on Google. I hope it was true. A woman was found dead in her bed with blood everywhere, and I mean everywhere. There were wine glasses or drinking glasses throughout the house with blood in them. I think blood may have been smeared about as well. So the investigators assumed some bizarre ritual, a gang of people, the whole 9 yards. Long story short, she had some strange clotting problems and was bleeding out of her mouth for an extended period of time. She probably got hazy from the loss of blood and was just trying not to make a mess in her house, so she kept spitting the blood in glasses. Eventually, she was overcome and died in her bed. I only hope it was true because I don't want to propagate lies. I was about to say out of context the whole "I hope it's true" is a bit weird. I did an internship at a PD one year. I got to be with a forensic team for a week. I got to see the aftermath of what a stabbing looks like. A 113 stab wound aftermath. Yes, 113 is correct. Unreal amounts of blood. I used a kitchen knife. Upon first inspection, it appeared like a dozen because there was so much blood on the body they couldn't tell how many there actually was. Gruesome. I actually personally know someone who was almost decapitated in a similarly excessive and brutal way. They survived and they were a very nice person. They moved away a good long while ago and, well, I hope they're doing well. I regularly post on Unsolved Mysteries, so I thought this was fitting here. One of the best cases on Forensic Files was a cold case that had gone unsolved for decades. A man told police he had picked up a hitchhiker in the evening. After the man and the hitchhiker got into a fight, the man threw him out of his car 2 miles away from his mother's house on a busy highway. The man later came home to his mother's house only to find the hitchhiker at his mother's house. He left to go call the police from a payphone. This was before cell phones. The police found his mother dead in bed. The man was a beneficiary of a huge life insurance policy and was the prime suspect. The cops or anyone did not believe the man's story. It was inconceivable that the hitchhiker, who did not know where the mother's house was, could make a 2-mile journey which turns in a neighborhood to just randomly break in and kill the man's mother who he didn't know. But there was blood at the scene and a palm print on the staircase that was not the man's nor the mother's. After some investigation, people at Hardee's did confirm that there was a man that fit the description looking to hitchhike. Still, they just assumed the man had paid the other man to kill his mother. 15 years later, after the invention of CODIS, the DNA was matched to a career criminal who definitely matched the description of the hitchhiker. After bringing him in and interrogating him, the killer had no idea he had killed the mother of the man who gave him a ride. He simply walked through this neighborhood looking for a house that looked empty, and his mother's was the only one without the lights on. It's baffling. It also sounds like just plain awful luck. I was at a regional medical center in rural Guatemala when we had a case come in from an RTA, road traffic accident, involving a pedestrian and a chicken bus. For those who don't know, a popular but incredibly dangerous form of public transport are retired American school buses that have been painted all sorts of vibrant colors, but underneath, the mechanics are shot to hell. Anyway, this pedestrian had been hit by one of these rolling death traps, which was fully loaded going around 80 miles per hour, and ended up getting wrapped under the front right wheel arch and completely mangled beyond recognition. They found bits of this guy spread 2 kilometers down the road, and the initial impact had split his torso down the middle and basically turned him inside out. When all the bits had been collected, the height of the body bag was around 2 inches, so you can imagine the state of the remains. Passers-by helped us pick up bits from the side of the road, but dogs and cats ran off with a fair amount of the smaller bits. Guatemala is a cool place. First of all, I also never heard of a chicken bus. I assumed it was literally that, a bus for chickens to be transported to wherever chickens need be. Second of all, my God, he was bloody... there's barely anything left of him if that's the case. Not a forensic scientist, but I majored in anthropology, with a focus on forensic anthropology. Given that, I was a fairly regular reader of the Forensic Science Quarterly. Here are a couple that I remember. Kid found on top of an elevator in a 6-story dorm. Apparently, he was elevator surfing, which is just as dumb as it sounds. He somehow got his head caught in the cables and got it twisted around a couple of times. This did not immediately kill him. He died from asphyxiation, which means he had anywhere from 30 to a couple of minutes to contemplate what had happened to him before he lost consciousness. Another one was sort of a mystery case. Headless corpse found in a truck in a national park. No head was to be found in the immediate area. Truck was turned on but had run out of gas. The wound was very clean, no sawing, almost like a guillotine cut. The investigating authorities were rather confused, but eventually they found a receipt in his pocket for 50 yards of nylon rope. They widened the investigation and eventually found the rope tied to a tree with a noose at the end. Further searching of this area eventually turned up the head. Pretty unique method of self-deletion. Mystery solved. This one isn't from the magazine, but a story personally relayed to me from the officer involved. A call comes in for a 50-ish black woman dead in a garage. Investigation reveals it is actually a 35-year-old white male. Dude put on a dress, rigged a noose to his garage door opener, and proceeded to watch some smut in his garage while choking himself with the garage door opener. Battery in the remote died, and then so did he. I am reminded of an episode of BoJack Horseman. I had a professor who was an expert in osteology and would train radiologists and doctors to recognize defensive fractures in arm bones. Defending yourself from an attack can leave a very distinctive spiral fracture on your forearm, and in his years of research, he'd never encountered that specific fracture pattern anywhere except in a defensive wound. Until he was attending a seminar at the University of Toronto in February, and when leaving the lecture, he was walking down an outdoor flight of stairs when someone called out to him to ask a question. He had his hands in his pockets because he wasn't wearing gloves, turned, slipped, and fell while perpendicular to the steps. His forearm hit the step and resulted in the exact spiral fracture he'd never seen anywhere else. And best part is that the radiologist that examined him was someone he himself trained to look for this sort of fracture as a warning sign for domestic violence. I'm picturing the dude who fell goes in, his student or former student, the radiologist examines him and is like, "Sir, has your wife been hitting you?" A bit late, but this is my area, so why not go for it? I'm in third year as a forensic anthropology student, so I don't have my own cases yet, but I've studied hundreds and have been told about some. My professor in advanced forensic methods was one of the leads in the case of Anthony Hardy, who basically killed people, dismembered them, and put their body parts in bins that were eventually found by a homeless guy. Another one she worked on, actually all I'm going to list were ones she was involved with, involved a man who went to park his car in his garage as he normally did, but his wife's car was in the spot. She refused to move it, so naturally, he stabbed her about 17 times, put her in his boot, and drove off. He explained the bloodstains away as being animal blood of something he'd hit, carried home in his boot, and cut it up on the garage floor. Obviously, this was a crap excuse, as simple blood testing showed it was human. She ran us through the forensics involved in that case, and it was quality stuff. One was a man found with his wrist and throat cut sitting on the floor of his living room. Depressed old man. Self-deletion, right? Wrong. The cut to his throat stopped halfway across and was at an unusual angle. The stopping halfway through is a good sign of holding someone from behind, reaching around and slitting the throat. Stopping halfway is in that position, it's much harder to fight a struggle. Also, the wrist wound had very little blood and was evidently done after the throat slit. The way he was sat showed that it was likely a loved one, as his body was taken care of, as strange as that sounds, and placed in a loving position. Possibly the weirdest one, a woman was found dead in the hole at the bottom of the stairs with blunt force trauma to the skull. There was a large hole in the ceiling above her, and the situation told to the forensic team by the police is that she fell through the loft. In the loft, no boxes were moved, and there were loads around the site of the hole. If she fell, she would have grabbed out, right? More damning, it was clear, by some sawdust in the state of the slats, that someone had used a saw to cut through the wood. Also, the blood splatter on the wall was all wrong. Basically, what had happened was that her husband had smashed her head in, put her at the bottom of the stairs, cut a hole in the loft, called the police, and told them of the accident. He also tried to kill the family liaison officer in the kitchen when the police were there after he realized the jig was up. Seen a lot more stuff than that. Self-deletions that look like murders but no evidence found, vice versa, bodies found in burnt buildings, bodies found in swamps or moors from years back. terrible labs for the production of illegal substances. Even got sort of taught how to make illegal substances, actually. Mass graves, photos, grapes, murder victims. It's pretty grim at times. I'm just picturing the dude who, left his wife at the bottom of the stairs and everything, thinking, oh yeah, I'm smart. I'm real smart. I'm like a Columbo villain. From a family friend, people who do lots of yoga involving rolling their heads around the axis of their neck, over time it wears away the corners of the vertebrae, which is why you're not supposed to do it. He saw a few cases of people getting into relatively minor car crashes. What should have been a nasty case of whiplash instead becomes fatal, as their spine was weakened and can't stop the momentum of their head. So it just pops right off of the spinal column. The head doesn't fly away or anything, it's still held on by muscle, but the driver is just as dead. I gotta be honest, through all of the violent descriptions of the things that happen to people in this, I'm just getting a blast of the X-rays from Mortal Kombat or something of whatever I'm describing. It's crazy. I'm not even a Mortal Kombat fan. I'm more of a Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, Blaze Blue guy. Hell, if you catch me in the right mood, I might want to play Dead or Alive more than friggin' Mortal Kombat. An ex-journalist once told me the story that got him out of journalism. He covered a story where there was a house fire. Police suspected arson. Then they discovered the body of a young girl in the house. It was not the owner's, but a local girl whose mom was a junkie. Turned out that the mother was pimping her daughter out to the owner. Some local residents knew he was a nonce and set fire to his house, killing him and the girl. That's just sad. I mean, I don't give a crap what happens to a nonce, but the kid, oh man. I am a wound researcher, currently specializing in genetic changes along wound healing phases. Forensics does a lot of research into this, as the progression of a wound reveals a lot about time of death, conditions, etc. Prior to this, I had worked with cadavers and stuff, majored in neuropsych, premed roots, so lots of bloody stuff. I thought that I had a low squeamish index, as I see most stuff as a part of life. Holy crap, these studies I am reviewing right now. Apparently, a lot of people have massive chronic wounds that go untreated for a long time because they're diabetic, and A, don't have the proper vasculature for proper nociceptor function, and B, don't care enough about their bodies. So forensics can help differentiate whether a wound existed prior to death or not, and studies also look at different subpopulations to show wound progression in general, and some studies show graphic pictures to depict this. Seeing a morbidly obese man's leg split open like a wilted banana peel put me off work for a day. I couldn't crop the picture out and I scrapped the paper from consideration because the images comparing injury progression and chronic wound changes post-death were full of the most messed up diabetic wounds. I get that it's not a grisly murder, but I can handle that sort of stuff. I feel empathy for combat wound research I cover, and I don't recoil from any of those cases. Pressure ulcers don't flinch me. But diabetic wounds? I need to get back into brains. I checked some of the examples of wounds that this individual talked about, and yeah, they're all pretty gross. And yeah, the diabetic wounds are pretty damn bad.
Worked a burglary one time where the homeowner left in the morning and came back to discover their house had been broken into during the day. Normal things were stolen, electronics, cash, jewelry, etc. But what was left behind is a head scratcher. The burglar took a dump on the toilet seat cover and then covered it nearly with a towel. The victim wanted it collected for DNA processing. Nope. Forensics swabbed it and left it for the homeowners to handle. I gave them some latex gloves and wished them luck. Full disclosure, I'm a cop, not forensics.
Men, what's the most creepy thing a woman has ever done to you? In rage, in the middle of the argument, she took my fish out of the aquarium and threatened to step on it. I saved the little guy. It was a beta, if you want to know. Takes anger out on small creatures. That right there, my friend, is a red flag. Cut off all of her pubic hair, put them in between layers of scotch tape, crammed them in an envelope with a pair of her used panties, and put the envelope under my windshield wiper. There was a note that read something like, "I know we can't be together, but now you'll always remember me." She was right. It's already been stated what she was trying to accomplish. I just can't fathom as to why she came up with that. Probably not as exciting as most here, but still super frickin' weird. I was staying at my friend's house, sleeping in his guest room. Friend is at work, his girlfriend is at home. One thing about this room is that it has a very heavy door that has to be held open by something super heavy or else it slams shut. Well, I sleep with the door closed. I wake up in the morning, and as I do every morning, I laid there for a bit longer before actually getting out of bed. Well, this time, all of a sudden, I see the door open, the light is still off, but the hallway light being on means I can see if someone's standing in the doorway. I have my eyes kind of opened and I can see that she's just standing there in the doorway, staring at me. I didn't move. I wanted to see what the hell would happen because this was thoroughly freaking me out. She just stood there for at least 10 minutes, didn't look away, didn't walk around the room. I was laying at a weird angle where I could see her perfectly. She could see me, but she couldn't see that my eyes were half open. I thought she may have been in there to grab something because there's a bunch of stuff in the closet, clothes and such. Nope. 10 minutes I waited for her to do something or to walk out. Finally, I flinched and feigned waking up and I heard her run out and slam the door. I got up, went to the kitchen, and she was as bubbly as could be, acting like nothing happened. Acting like she didn't just spend 10 minutes watching me sleep. I kind of think if you were just laying there watching her, watching you for like 10 minutes, if that was even as long as it happened for, I think you were hoping for something to happen. I would have just said, hey, why are you staring at me? Can I help you? Do you want something? Dated this girl who I later found out to be literally a compulsive liar and also into witchcraft. After not being able to deal with her insanity anymore, I broke things off. She would wait outside my door for God knows how long until I came home and say she left something at my house. This happened a lot. One day, I was going to add a new email account to my phone and realized that her email account was still saved on my phone. I shouldn't have checked it, but she was actively stalking me and I needed to know what I was up against. There were tons of emails to some witchcraft lady she found online somehow. All about me. She was paying this internet witch like hundreds of dollars an hour for what I would consider witch consulting. It was all about me. How to cast spells to get me back, how to enchant me, how to curse my new GF, all kinds of crazy crap. She was using this lady as like a weird therapist almost, asking her a bunch of relationship questions too. This went on for months. The witch lady was getting a little annoyed at her, I could feel, although she couldn't complain that much because she was draining her for literally thousands of dollars. She told the witch that at some point I told her that she needs to seek professional help. The witch actually told her that might not be a bad idea. She ended up moving into the house of a mutual friend, this girl from school that was literally one building away from mine. My friend told me that she was always burning weird spices and candles. It was at the direction of the witch, actually. It was creepy as hell, and eventually she cut my brakes. I'm reminded of this time I saw that some witches were trying to spiritually take down Allah or something and needed like a lot of witch power to be able to defeat him. Because, you know, Allah is just so spiritually powerful, you need as many witches as you can get. But also, yeah, she pretty cray-cray. I fell asleep sitting next to one of my friends on the way home from a school trip in 12th grade. I woke up to her using my hand to play with herself. As I began to regain consciousness, she threw my hand at me and made a huge scene about it. I never talked to her about it. It bothers me to this day. Definitely top 3. Say what? That's gotta be considered assault on some degree. What the figgity uck? Girl I had seen for 2 dates had her best friend SMS me anonymously claiming we went in a bar the night before and offering to come over to my place. I rarely went to bars as I worked night shift at the time, so I knew I hadn't met anyone at a bar. Eventually, after probing and pushing, I got the girl to confess. She said she was just testing to make sure I was trustworthy. Didn't see her again. I understand the need, the want, the desire for a trustworthy man in your life, but goddamn, there are better ways to go about it than that. Smarter ways, even. Met a girl at a bar and we ended up back at her place. We fooled around and fell asleep. She seemed normal all night and I saw no red flags at all. I definitely would have dated her again, until she went crazy. I woke up at around 5 a.m. and started getting dressed to leave. I had to get home and get ready for work. She woke up while I was dressing and totally freaked out. She was screaming angrily, "You can't leave!" I explained I needed to go to work and that I'd call her later. She was having none of that. Then she attacked. I literally had to physically fight my way out of her apartment with a few scratches on my arm for souvenirs. I have no idea what her deal was, and I never went back to the bar I met her in. What's the problem, girl? He said he'd call you back. I mean, I guess there's a chance that he's lying, but, you know, what the hell? This happened to a buddy of mine, except she threatened to call the police and say that he raped her if he didn't stay. He nervously left the apartment. She called the cops and pressed charges. He lost his job, his sanity, everything. She eventually admitted nothing happened, yet his life was already crumbled into pieces and his reputation ruined. She never suffered any consequences. Be careful out there. It's sad but true, yeah. Some women will do you like that. A girl broke into my house 3 times in a week while I was rehearsing Cellist. Each time she left money to repair the window, a large bag of Twizzlers, and 2 cans of tuna for my cat. That was it. We had never been romantically or physically involved. We barely even knew each other. This oddly sounds to me like the modern version of the humble beginnings of a festive or cultural celebration of some sort.
Once a year, around the globe, women break into men's apartments and leave Twizzlers and cat food, whether they have a cat or not.
That'd be crazy.
Really drunk chick asked me to dance and proceeded to keep trying to pull my willy out, like forcefully. When I'd finally resisted enough, she called me a nerd and stormed off.
You're not a nerd, buddy.
You're a survivor.
I was probably 9. It was after church service, and there's this new lady there who took a liking to me. She was the new wife of the minister. We were outside waiting for the grown-ups to come out. I think they were having a meeting inside, and this new lady took me to a bench nearby. We sat, asked me lots of questions. Then she put my head on her lap, stroked my hair while humming a lullaby like I'm a baby. It felt really uncomfortable, and I really wanted to escape, but I was a shy little boy and didn't want to offend her or something. Saw my sister from afar snickering at us. It went on like this for 30 minutes, but felt like hours. I was dying with cringe inside.
If I were that child's sister, there'd be a point if it really went on for 30 minutes, which I highly doubt this woman sat there on a bench and stroked this random child's head for 30 minutes unless she really is a little bit unstable. But there'd be a point where you're kinda concerned, right?
Weird. I had a similar experience when I was younger that your story made me rethink. I lived in a neighborhood with middle-class housing. I had a friend whose parents were divorced, so his mother lived right down the street from me, and when he wasn't with his father in Hawaii, he was with her. So I was young, like 10 or 11 years old. My friend was with his father at the time, so he was not there. I was walking home, and when I was walking past his house, his mother was outside sitting in front of her garage smoking a cigarette. It was odd since we never really spoke other than standard pleasantries. I was respectful, as you should be. She made me sit on her lap while she talked, and she, for whatever reason, kissed my cheek multiple times with her arm around me. I know, sounds hentai AF, but I can assure you this happened. I can't for the life of me remember what she was saying since I was a kid that was only focused on getting home. She had red lipstick on, which was now on my skin, of course. Moving along, after a while, she let me go and I walked home where my mom prepared me a bath. She asked me about the lipstick and I told her what happened. She didn't react much, but thinking in hindsight, she may have freaked out. Nothing happened after that, and I was a very optimistic child who didn't think much of it. I think that she was lonely without her son. She lived alone and I don't recall her having visitors. Just thinking as a parent in 2020, having your 10-year-old son come home with lipstick on his cheek would be a huge yikes.
Yeah, that one's just a tad bit sketchy in my opinion. Met a girl at a party. We flirted, then we ended up in my bedroom. This was in my apartment. Heavy makeout. I suggest having intercourse. She declines. Heavier making out, basically including anything that's not intercourse. I suggest having intercourse again. She declines. Fair enough. We stopped the making out and planned to see each other again. The day we were supposed to meet, she stood me up. I had cooked and it was already time to meet. She told me that she doesn't want to see me again because I wasn't pushy enough. She liked men who are less soft and gentle. She basically told me that when she said no, I shouldn't have listened. Good riddance, I say. I don't care if a woman means yes when she says no. I take out a dictionary and I show her the meaning of no because that's what she said. Plus, in this day and age, how can you not be absolutely paranoid all the time that people are like recording conversations to like use in future courts of law or something? Keep in mind I'm only a junior in high school. I was about in 7th or 8th grade and I was at a New Year's party at my grandparents' house with all of their friends. You can tell I'm a party animal spending my New Year's with 60 and 70-year-olds, and one of their friends who I'd known for a while continued touching me and grabbing me in my waist and thigh region. She would sneak it in like under the table or walking past each other or whatever. I totally understand the stereotypical grandma cheek pinch or whatever, but this was something else. After squeezing my butt with both hands, I had enough and said something to her. The rest of the night was super awkward, but the worst part was my grandma was defending her and downplaying the whole situation. It wasn't until I told my mom the next day she lost her temper on my grandma that she finally admitted she was wrong, and I haven't seen her since. For clarification, the person they haven't seen since is the groper. Well, here goes. I'm in high school and we're having PE. A girl that I hardly know asks me, "Hey, you want to see my butt?" And I say, no. She then proceeds to pull her whole pants down right in front of 30-odd students and the PE teacher. Everyone was just like, WTF, and she just pulls him back up and walks away like nothing happened. Someone I worked with sniffed the inside of my jacket that I forgot to bring with me. Later, she gave me a date with her as a wedding gift, only to be used before the wedding, and asked me if I was truly happy on my wedding day. Some people really do choose to strike at the worst or weirdest times, don't they? Older woman was cutting my hair. She was 60, I was about 24. She rambled on about how she loves bearded men and
I might be old, but I can still look at the menu.
she then told me about how she likes to go to clubs with her son in his 40s because she's his wingman and likes younger men. While this was happening, she kept running her hands down the front of my shirt. I later brought it up to the other employees there, who just laughed it off and said, oh yeah, that's just her. Apparently sexual assault is just part of her personality. The compliments didn't bother me too much until she started getting handsy. I'm fine with a bit of light flirting, but I'll admit if I had to sit through an entire haircut with this woman, I'd probably be like, you know what? I'm gonna go to a different chair. Woman I was engaged to was doing all the prep for the wedding. This was in her country and I didn't understand the language all that well, so I was a bit limited on how much I could help her out, other than helping to cut the invite cards out, etc. She was a very hot-tempered person as she was, but as much as I asked her what tasks I could help out with, she just refused to involve me in anything at all, and then complained that I wasn't helping enough. She argued and argued with me about how I didn't care despite my efforts to be involved in all the prep. It was all very manipulative. Eventually, she actually pulled a knife out at me. I slapped it off her wrist and she stormed off. When she left for work the next day, I packed my bags, took a taxi to the airport, and noped out of there. I'm picturing this woman coming back from work and being like, why has my fiancé left me? It couldn't possibly be because I pulled a knife on him. Wearing my sports jacket when I went to grab a fast food order, some woman I've never seen before shouted hi and waved at me like we were best friends, gave an awkward, confused wave back and left with my food. A couple hours later, I get a friend request on Facebook from someone I recognized as her. Best guess is she saw my jacket and stalked the sports roster to find my name and added me from that. Got blocked real quick. That or on a first date, she asked, if you were going to kill me, how would you do it? I know how I would kill you. Then proceeded to tell me her plan on how she would kill me and get away with it. I don't know, sounds kinda hot if you ask me.
Oh yeah, baby. Why don't you tell me again how you're gonna murder me in my sleep and get away with it?
Asked me if I had feelings for her the day before her wedding, which I was in. Then after being married, insisted that we talk, and was trying to sit on my lap at a party when we were both drunk, and I told her it could wait until the morning. She revealed in the morning that she had cut herself after I wouldn't talk with her. I told her we couldn't be friends, and she texted me every day for 6 months without me responding until I learned how to block her number. A mutual friend told me she asked for my number from him this last summer. I haven't spoken to her for 10 years, so there's that. This woman is either down bad or she wants problems all the time. Back when I was working overnights at a national pharmacy chain, there was an older lady in her 50s that would pick up prescriptions and try to hit on me a few times. The most direct and creepiest thing she said to me was, I don't know why women who go for younger men are called cougars. I like to be called a python because I like to ensnare young men. Do you like pythons? Luckily, I was saved by a customer that promptly needed something picked up, and I ignored her until she left. I don't know why this just reminded me of an interaction I had at a bar where this older woman approached me, started talking to me, went, oh, drinking on a school night, are we, young man? And I looked her dead in the eye and went, madam, I am 25 years old. I haven't been to school in like 7 years. When I was 17 eating a slice of pizza in a pizzeria in New York, I was sitting facing the glass looking out to the street. Time was around 7 p.m. It was getting dark. I'll never forget this 50-something-year-old lady who was walking on the sidewalk. Saw me eating, slowed down, stared straight at me with the most seductive grin and then winked. Then continued on walking. Until that point in my life, I had never felt so many emotions at once. I was turned on, weirded out, intrigued, scared. This was a day I will never forget. She had black hair and was pretty hot. This one's rather nice, no invasion of someone's personal space or anything like that, just a little smile and a wink. I had a girlfriend once that was really possessive, to the point of stalker behavior. We had been dating for maybe 3 months and she didn't have a life. She never did anything and always wanted to spend time with me, and I was a fairly busy person. It gets to the point where she doesn't believe that I could have so much going on in my life that I can't video call her for at least an hour at the start and end of every single day. If I wasn't replying to her messages within 5 minutes, she'd send about 7 more, then call me a few times. Then it got to the point that she looked at all my social profiles to see when I was last online to see whether I should have seen her texts or not. Also, within 2 weeks, she had planned our wedding and named our 4 children Max, Harrison, Lily, and Sophia. Went downtown to CVS to get my dad's medication at like 9 at night. While waiting for the cashier to come back, 2 old women in line made conversation with me. Unprompted, they started feeling on my shoulders and arms. Pulled the "I have a girlfriend" lie while trying to be nice so no trouble would happen. Inside, I was extremely creeped out. As if she had a sixth sense, the cashier reappeared out of nowhere so I could pay and leave, giving the 2 women a glare in the meantime. They gave my biceps a squeeze before leaving me alone. Felt so dirty. I took a shower after I got home. Next time I saw that cashier, I thanked her. "No problem," she said. Gave her a tip. For those asking, no, nothing progressed. The cashier had an engagement ring on her finger. Were some people hoping for a surprise love story? Maybe not the worst, but here's something. I was in a really low mental state due to some past trauma and recent health issues when we started dating, which I think was part of the appeal for her. Since looking back, the whole thing was very predatory. Iffy age gap, 24M and 32F. She started talking shared finances just a month or so into the dating. It's pretty obvious what she was about in hindsight. Anyway, she encouraged me to start keeping a journal to help with my mental recovery. What a twist. For the journal, she would ask questions and I would write answers to them, which she would read. Most of it was extremely personal. A good amount also sensitive, sexual information. I too am boggled that I went along with this. She was also doing classic abuser things, trying to cut me off from my best friends and all. Fortunately, it only took a few months for me to start seeing clearly, though I wasn't quite committed to breaking up. She must have sensed some resistance though. One day she asked for my journal, set it aside, then proceeded to start the breakup talk. I agreed that it wasn't working out for me either, and overall it was very amicable until I asked for my journal back, literally instant screaming that it belonged to her. I just stayed seated and kept repeating that she hadn't written a thing in it and I was the one who originally purchased it. She tossed it at me after a bit and I bounced out of there like a bat out of hell. She did send an apology about it over social media private messaging some years later, but it was also while letting me know that she would be attending kink meetups in my city though, so yeah, I gotta agree that entire relationship sounded sus as all get out.
Was at work late upgrading PCs to Windows 10. I'm happily married and had only recently gotten married at the time. While I was in the contact center upgrading multiple PCs, I was kind of cornered by a young woman who wound up saying, "If you ever need a release from your wife, I'm here and more than happy to, mess around or something. I think you're super attractive." And it kept going for a few minutes. I mentioned that I'm happily married with no intentions of cheating, and she kind of pushed for a while longer, lingered while I kept working, and then eventually left. It was probably the most awkward 20 minutes I have ever sat through at work.
Hey, some women can't take no for an answer, and some of those women have never learned that patience is a virtue. But hey, good on you for not cheating on your wife. While I was at a rave, I had this girl walk up to me like the living dead while I was in a conversation with a bunch of people. This jaw swinger stops dead in front of me and says, "What's that?" and proceeds to grab me by the banger and beans with all the strength a turned-up 20-year-old can muster. I told her to get her frickin' hands off my junk and she scuttled away like Gollum being separated from his precious. About 10 minutes later, a friend taps me on the shoulder, points behind me, looking concerned, and tells me to look. There are 3 cops with a canine and a crying, crazy harlot claiming I tried to grape her. They were ready to frickin' destroy me without so much as a hint of proof. If I wasn't with so many people all night, most of which were young ladies there to back my story up, well, I'm pretty sure that nutbag could have ruined my life very easily. So, suddenly and inappropriately grabs a man by his banger and beans and then proceeds to accuse him of grape? What a cow. Played an MMO for a while where you could join 5 guilds. This lady was in 3 of them, was always nice but very flirty with me. Our guilds used TeamSpeak a lot and the 2 of us got to talking. Turns out though, we lived a few hundred miles and an international border away. We shared a crap ton of interests. She claimed to be in her 20s. I was over 30 at the time. We became friends, though she made it very clear to everyone that she wanted more. In fact, she referred to me as her nickname I went by in that game, and I found out that she was going to be traveling traveling to an area near me right around my birthday, so I offered to meet her in a public setting. That's when she dropped it on me. She wasn't really in her 20s, she was turning 16. Technically over the age of consent, but yeah, still a kid. Even if there weren't legal issues, I simply was not interested in dating anyone that young. I have a 5-year rule. I only date people that are within 5 years of me. So I had a long talk with her. I explained to her that I was damn near twice her age, and while her interest in me was flattering, I wasn't interested. She was devastated, crying, telling me I was making a mistake because she would be the best girlfriend/future wife possible. That age was just a number. Finally, I told her that in 2 years when she turned 18 and brought proof of that, I would consider going on a single date with her if she was really that serious, and that if all went well, I would consider making an exception to my 5-year rule. But under absolutely no circumstances would I ever date or even meet with someone that was under 18. She wasn't happy, but eventually accepted that was the best she would get, and we stayed in touch even after I left the game. Fast forward almost but not quite 2 years, she has finally found a boyfriend. She hits me up on TeamSpeak. She wants me to travel up there to meet them because, in her words, she wants me to know exactly what the hell I missed out on by unfairly and unreasonably turning her down. Age is just a number and shouldn't have gotten in the way. She has since become more normal, but yeah, those 2 incidents really creeped me out. No, I have never dated her. I had dated other women I had met in games before then, never have since. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, potential neckbeard and World of Warcraft player. I don't know if you can join 5 guilds in World of Warcraft. If anyone can guess what the game he was playing was, I'd love to know. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Linked in the description below.